Chapter 896. The martial artist's levels here were even stricter. No matter how talented you were, no matter what kind of ever-changing divine ability you had, it was simply wishful thinking for you to kill someone who was a whole level higher than you. Take Yin Yang's battle for example. Even though he had a divine weapon in hand and the advantage of sneak attacks, he had to fight a long battle of attrition with all his trump cards before he could barely exhaust the other party. In the end, he still needed Little Fatty's final strike to kill a 4th level honor. It was difficult to understand the bitterness in his heart unless he was the one involved. A thought flashed across Yin Yang's mind: if the 4th level honor had not taken the two of them seriously at the beginning of the battle and had not killed Little Fatty at once, perhaps the outcome of the battle would have been rewritten. If that was the case, the residence of 9 Supremes could not be opened anymore. This venerable and the majordomo would have gone to the King of Hell together. At least, the majordomo would definitely go to the King of Hell. Yin Yang was not confident that he could protect himself and Little Fatty at the same time then. In reality, there weren't many Shouja that registered a sect that could live until they established their own sect. Those who could build their own sects and die of old age were not many either. As for those who could truly develop their sects, not only were there not many of them, there were also very few of them. After these people died, the white flag image would automatically fly back. Yes, the account would be closed. Of course, those who could survive and seize the celestial luck banner, cough. As for now, they were being chased by 2 4th level honor and were in the midst of a desperate escape. We're being chased by dozens of people. Little Fatty cried, and you've really killed a lot of people. The only thing we can be sure of now is that our troubles are getting worse. Yin Yang snorted coldly without commenting. Little Fatty counted with his fingers. Up until now, boss, you've killed a total of 47 people, 29 of whom were rogue cultivators. This can basically be ignored. The remaining 18 people, on the other hand, have celestial luck banners rising after their deaths to prove their identities. The 16 black celestial luck banners are fine, but there are 2 green celestial luck banners. Do you know what this means? We've offended at least 10 sects with celestial luck banners. All the sects with celestial luck banners within 10,000 miles have been offended by us. And it's only been a day. Little Fatty grimaced and wanted to cry, but no tears came out. However, Yin Yang could not be blamed for this. If he had not lost control and revealed the ethereal amethyst, would he have gotten himself into such a huge mess? Could Yin Yang kill so many people? In the end, the root cause was Fatty. Fatty's heart was about to shatter from fear. If it were not for this knowledge, Fatty might have carried Yin Yang and run away when he was dealing with the 4th level honor, instead of killing him in a rage. They had already caused trouble. Once the sect found out that they were the culprits, then they would truly never have a day of peace. What's wrong with that? Yin Yang, on the other hand, was quite open-minded. I'll offend them sooner or later. There's no difference in the outcome. It's nothing at all. To him, that was indeed the case. Those who should be killed had to be killed sooner or later. It was really only a matter of time. Our priority now isn't to avoid being hunted down, but to find a place to stay. Yin Yang said, then we'll recruit. You said that's the ethereal amethyst? The ethereal amethyst. Of course it's the ethereal amethyst. Little Fatty perked up at the mention of it. It's a priceless treasure. Isn't this thing called the Eastern Amethyst? Yin Yang asked. Strange. For example, we're both humans, but you're called Yin Yang and I'm called Xian Duo Duo. But in the eyes of demons or beasts, aren't we all humans? Little Fatty rolled his eyes. Is it strange to have a few different names for the same thing? Yin Yang was speechless. He had actually been lectured by this Little Fatty and even thought that he had a point and could not refute it. This was ridiculous. The ethereal amethyst is a dream item for cultivation that cultivators yearn for. Little Fatty stroked the spatial ring on his finger contentedly, his expression mesmerized as if he was caressing the beautiful ethereal amethyst. What's there to yearn for? Dream item? Yin-Yang scoffed. It's just an energy crystal that contains a lot of energy. After absorbing the spiritual chi in it, it'll still be useless. It can't escape the fate of turning into dust and vanishing into the dust. Absorbed, completely? Turning into dust? Little Fatty stared at Yin-Yang, dumbfounded. Big brother, you use the ethereal amethyst like this? What's wrong with that? Big brother, don't ever say that again. If a high-level cultivator finds out, he'll definitely beat you to death and drown you in their spit. He'll be condemned by everyone and die of 1,000 diseases. Little Fatty's expression was filled with grief and indignation. He wailed as if he was going to die. What a waste of God's gifts. He looks so smart, but he's actually such an unwise fool. Why did I follow such a person? The ethereal amethyst is rare and hard to come by. It's not only because it contains a lot of energy, but the main reason is that as long as it's worn, it'll automatically attract the spiritual chi of heaven and earth to assist in cultivation. If a piece of ethereal amethyst were to absorb the spiritual chi within, it can only supply a beginner honor cultivator for a few days at most. However, if it's worn, it can continuously absorb spiritual chi. In other words, in the same cultivation environment, the spiritual chi surrounding you will always be much more than the spiritual chi around others. At least, it'll be more than twice as much. Little Fatty's cheeks were trembling from the heartache. Although using the ethereal amethyst like this will still deplete the crystal, as long as it's not overused, a piece of ethereal amethyst can be used for 100 years before its energy is completely depleted. Such a rare treasure, you actually sucked it dry in one breath. How could you bear to do that? Also, from what you've said, you've given me more than a dozen pieces of ethereal amethyst. This proves that you've overused the crystal more than once. Not just one piece, but many pieces? Little Fatty's gaze was like he was about to devour someone, as if he wanted to take a few bites out of Yin-Yang to vent his anger. Amethyst. Yin-Yang rubbed his nose, feeling a little embarrassed. He had used it like this before. A piece of ethereal amethyst had indeed been used up within a few days. It was similar to what Little Fatty had said. It turned out that this thing actually had such a great effect. He had underestimated it. Sigh, a lack of knowledge was a flaw. This saying had been reflected time and time again since a certain supreme had come to this realm. Haha, we still have 10 pieces of ethereal amethyst here. 10 pieces of ethereal amethyst and we can recruit 10 ace cultivators. Qian Duo was brimming with confidence. Chapter 897. Little Fatty said with certainty, with just this, it'll be a piece of cake to recruit 10 experts above level 4 supremacies. Boss, your residence of 9 supremes can be built at any time. I'm starting to miss the crystals you've wasted. How could you do that? 4th level honor. To be honest, Yin-Yang was rather dissatisfied with this level. It was too low. It was absolutely impossible to charge for the lower class celestial luck banner with a few 4th level honor experts. A saint was more like it. Yin-Yang raised his eyebrows. Can't you say something else? I can use my crystals however I want. Are you sure it's so simple? Aren't you being too naive? Fatty chuckled. It's really that simple. As long as a contract is signed, no one will go against the contract before the crystals are depleted. In other words, they won't go against the contract for at least 100 years. Sigh, what I mean by success, and what I mean by you being naive, is your understanding of my purpose of building the residence of 9 supremes. If it's only to recruit experts, I really wouldn't have come to you. What I need are brothers who can work together and share the same virtues, not thugs who work hard for a piece of ethereal amethyst. Subordinates like that can be loyal to me for a piece of ethereal amethyst, but who knows if they won't stab me in the back for greater benefits. The sect I'm building is meant to soar straight into the 9 heavens. Yin-Yang said casually. Huh? Soar straight into the 9 heavens? Qian Duo was stunned and asked carefully, may I ask the final destination? The short-term goal should be at least at the level of the Eastern Celestial Palace. Yin Yang thought about it and felt that he should be more conservative and not be too arrogant. After all, he had just arrived. Fatty's head shook and he plopped onto the ground, saying in a trembling voice, "Big brother. Big brother, stop talking first. I'm dizzy, I'm so dizzy." From the beginning, Fatty could tell that this new boss of his seemed to be unusual. Not only did he not follow the usual path, he had endless tricks up his sleeves, and his vision was also unusually accurate. He could be said to be far-sighted. Other than the shortcoming of not being familiar with the bound of universe, everything else about him was admirable. He also knew that his boss had great ambitions. However, little Fatty didn't expect this person's ambition to be so great. It was boundlessly huge. At the level of the Eastern Celestial Palace. And at the very least. Why don't you go ride a donkey instead? At the very least. And what the hell was that short-term goal? Do your parents know that you have such great ambitions? If you're so good at thinking, just go straight to the heavens. Just as he was deep in thought, Yin Yang hummed in acknowledgement and stood up. Standing at the peak, he looked at a spot of land surrounded by mountains and said faintly, "I think that place is not bad." Surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, one peak stands out. "Let's go over and take a look. If you think it's good, let's go there." As he spoke, he had already fluttered away. "Once we've decided on the location, you'll have to think of a way to sell these 10 pieces of ethereal amethysts and build up the foundation." "I don't want to." Little Fatty panicked. That was the ethereal amethyst. How many people don't get to see it in their entire lives? Now that we have it, you actually want to sell it? This is funding the enemy, you bastard. If you're so great, just go to the heavens. Don't trample on my weak soul in this mortal world, I can't take it. Boss, let's discuss this. Can we not sell the ethereal amethysts? What? Not sell? Where are we going to get the money if we don't buy it? How are we going to build a sect without money? If we can't build a sect, how are we going to talk about grand goals? Besides, I've only given you 10 pieces. You don't think that's all there is, do you? Huh? How dare you call me an idiot? Who are you calling an idiot? I'm an idiot, I'm an idiot. As long as you still have the ethereal amethysts, I'm willing to be an idiot. Do you really have more? What the F***ck are you talking about? Tell me quickly, roughly how much spiritual jade can a piece of ethereal amethyst be exchanged for? If so many ethereal amethysts were to appear in the market, wouldn't it devalue? Yin Yang now knew that the bound of universe's cultivator's currency was spiritual jade and spiritual pearls. There were 4 grades, lower, middle, upper, and supreme. Middle grade spiritual jade was equivalent to 100 lower grade spiritual jade, while upper grade was equivalent to 100 middle grade. Supreme grade spiritual jade was the rarest of them all and was equivalent to 10,000 upper grade spiritual jade. The higher the grade of the spiritual jade, the higher the demand. In other words, 10,000 upper grade spiritual jade was actually not as good as 1 supreme grade spiritual jade. However, the ones that were usually used for circulation were lower grade spiritual jade. For example, the ones that Lei Dongtian had given him were lower grade. As for the spiritual pearls, they were merely the fragments of spiritual jade. They were only circulated in the hands of ordinary people and exchanged for gold and silver. A piece of ethereal amethyst can probably be sold for about 3,000 pieces of upper-grade spiritual jade. It definitely won't devalue. This thing has a price but no supply. No matter how much you have, you'll only be fighting to buy it. Little Fatty said uncertainly. Only 3,000 upper-grade spiritual jade? That's not much. 3 pieces of ethereal amethysts can't even be exchanged for 1 supreme-grade spiritual jade. I thought it was worth more. Yin Yang was slightly dissatisfied with the number. Big brother, do you think that just anyone has 3,000 upper-grade spiritual jade? Ordinary transactions would never use upper-grade spiritual jade as a normal equivalent, alright? 3,000 upper-grade spiritual jade is really not a small amount. Although ethereal amethysts are precious and can be called a dream item, they're still a consumable item after all. This price tag is about right. Little Fatty expressed his sincere disdain towards Yun Yang's understanding of the prices of goods in this world. As for supreme-grade spiritual jade, ethereal amethysts have appeared before, but supreme-grade spiritual jade has never appeared before. What do you think? Cough, it seems that 10 pieces are enough? It's more than enough. This is definitely an unusually large amount of wealth. Yin Yang did a rough calculation after listening to him. One piece of upper-grade spiritual jade was equivalent to 10,000 pieces of lower-grade spiritual jade. 3,000 pieces of upper-grade spiritual jade was equivalent to 30 million pieces of lower-grade spiritual jade? 30 million? Oh, F***CK. That was quite a lot after calculating. Moreover, this is the previous market price. It's been a long time since ethereal amethysts have appeared in the market. Little Fatty was brimming with confidence, his eyes gleaming with a golden gleam. As long as I'm given time and opportunity, especially now when the news of the ethereal amethyst's sudden appearance in this world has exploded, I can definitely use these 10 pieces of ethereal amethysts to build a million-man city made entirely of lower-grade spiritual jade. Boss, how much more do you have? Little Fatty asked in a fawning manner. The little Fatty could vaguely feel that this was a wonderful situation. Judging by the boss's tone, the storage ring that he had given him before was clearly just a drop in the bucket. Did that not mean that he still had a considerable amount of ethereal amethysts with him? Oh my god. This piece of information isn't just explosive, it's simply world-shaking, world-shocking, unprecedented, and unprecedented. Little Fatty felt that if he did not get to the bottom of this, he would not be able to die in peace. Chapter 898. Cough, it's enough, it's more than enough. Why would I need so much, especially the 2 pieces in my pants? It's too extravagant, it's a blasphemy. Little Fatty was a little embarrassed. Scram. Yes. Little Fatty did not hold a grudge against a certain Supreme's reprimand. Instead, he wanted to roll a few times to show his loyalty. Yin Yang was very satisfied with the location of the sect. After shaking off all the pursuers, Yin Yang used another 2 days to make sure that the surroundings were safe. Finally, he confirmed that the sect would be built in the boundless mountains. Let's do it here. Yin Yang closed his eyes to think about what he wanted his sect to look like. Easy to defend and hard to attack was definitely the first requirement. Beautiful, generous, and so on, there was no need for such things at the moment. It would be clean and elegant with sufficient spiritual chi. Right, there had to be sufficient space to cultivate or battle. This was a must. Little Fatty disguised himself and ran away like a wisp of smoke after changing his appearance. There was nothing for him to do here for the time being. Making money was his main job. Yin Yang was not worried that Little Fatty would run away with the money. It was just a small amount anyway. Yin Yang did not mind if Little Fatty really ran away. It was really just a drop in the ocean. If Little Fatty returned after completing his mission, however, he would be a great help in the future. What he was considering now was how to plan and handle the terrain of the mountain in front of him. The silhouette of the white flag was in his hands. Yin Yang turned into a cloud and rose with the wind. He chanted in his heart, sketching out the shape of the mountains and rivers he wanted. When he reached a height of 10,000 feet, he flung it down. Rumble, the ground beneath him suddenly shook, the ground cracking and the mountains collapsing. In just a moment, the landscape had changed beyond recognition. Yin Yang stood high in the sky, looking down at the thousands of miles of mountains and rivers beneath his feet. He did not slack off, manipulating his will to change the landscape bit by bit, gradually turning it into what he imagined it to be. As his imagination gradually became reality, he could not help feeling shaken. A mountain rose from the ground. At the peak of the mountain, 8 smaller peaks stood on its left and right, forming a faint circular defense line to guard the northernmost peak. Among the 9 peaks was a large piece of flat land. On the 9 peaks, there were similar flat lands. These were all reserved for the martial arts arena. Since it was called the residence of 9 supremes, it was only natural that there would be 9 peaks dedicated to the world. Usually, the 9 leaders would each occupy a place, coordinating with each other from a distance. Once something happened, they would be able to gather quickly with a long howl. Also, the arrangement of the 9 mountains seemed to contain a formation that supported both offense and defense. Complemented by the current environment that was closest to nature, it could be said to be the most natural formation. With this as the foundation, the surrounding mountains and valleys were naturally pushed far away. The topography of the residence of 9 supremes stood out from the rest. The rest of the space was reserved for construction. The sect members were the foundation of the sect, so it was only natural that enough land for various types of buildings had to be reserved. Yin Yang already had a rough idea of what he wanted and what kind of building he needed. All he had to do was to perfect it later. At this point, the construction of the sect's foundation was nearing its end. This was probably the effect of the white flag, but it was already enough to shock Yin Yang. A mere wave of the white flag could have such a great effect and change the world in such a short time. This was only a flag, and it was the lowest level among all the known sect celestial luck banners, the white flag that was said to be the most useless. Watching the white flag silhouette slowly fade and finally turn into a wisp of green smoke, completely disappearing before him, Yin Yang understood that this was the only use of the flag. In the end, it would only leave a mark on him. However, this was already a great power that could shock the world. What a thing! It really deceives the world and changes the heaven and earth. Although there was no other use for this change other than changing the landscape of the mountains and rivers, this alone was enough to shake the world. It was difficult for a human to achieve. No matter how profound a person's cultivation base was, how powerful he could only achieve destruction when it came to the mountains and rivers. It would never be as good as moving the mountains and changing the land beyond recognition. What's left is to recruit soldiers and buy horses. Yin Yang mumbled to himself, I'd rather have nothing than have something shoddy. The residence of 9 supremes had always been Yin Yang's greatest obsession. As for whether or not he could gather the new 9 supremes, Yin Yang did not care much. To him, it did not matter even if he could not gather them. After all, as long as he was here, it meant that his 9 supremes brothers were all here. No matter how many people came in the future, no matter who they were, Yin Yang would not give them titles like Supreme Earth, Supreme Flame, or Supreme Wind. Calling him Supreme Money with Little Fatty earlier was just a joke, but it was also another option for Qian Duo to become one of the new 9 supremes. One's fate in life depended on one's own choices. It was fate that had nothing to do with anyone. Now that the sect's basic landscape has been built, it's time to reinforce it and set up the defensive structures. Yin Yang thought to himself. This kind of thinking was understandable and reasonable. Once the basic topography was completed, it would be nothing more than a fortress in the desert. It looked good, but it was useless. Once it encountered a battle between experts, it would suffer a slight impact and be unable to continue. Perhaps before the battle ended, the entire topography would be destroyed. Therefore, it was absolutely necessary to set up a mountain defense formation. As Yin Yang pondered, he suddenly heard a voice that was filled with rage and grievance coming from beneath his feet. Who's up there? What kind of bastard could do such a filthy thing that's so wicked that it's fuming with smoke and giving birth to a son without a penis? The voice was filled with unusual anger and manic agitation. Then, somewhere outside the 9 peaks, a disheveled human head popped out from a pile of rubble that was filled with smoke and dust. The person's original color could not be discerned from his clothes, which were extremely dirty and messy. Only his eyes looked as if they were about to spit fire. Shi Wuchen was enraged. He was utterly enraged. He had been injured by his enemies, who were pursuing him from all over the world due to their immense influence. He had been hiding from place to place with severe injuries, until he came here and was lucky enough to shake off his pursuers. What was even more surprising was that there was a hidden ground meridian underneath. Shi Wuchen was overjoyed and dove straight down, using the spiritual qi of the ground meridian to heal his injuries. However, the injuries he had sustained previously were too severe and had been delayed for a long time, causing his condition to deteriorate. He had only managed to recover 30% of his injuries after 3 years. Initially, he was meditating in seclusion to heal his wounds when suddenly, the mountains shook and the earth turned upside down. The veins of the earth changed in an instant. He was originally underground, but he was forcefully uprooted, and then buried by countless boulders. Chapter 899. Although Shi Wuchen also knew that the reason for this situation was most likely due to coincidence. Someone had established a sect on it, and everything was due to coincidence. But now, the result was that the vein of earth that he was using had been moved away, and he was also tormented. Moreover, he could no longer use this vein of earth to recover, let alone improve his cultivation and so on. Affected by all these negative emotions, Shi Wuchen was naturally enraged to the point where he could not restrain his anger. Do you think it's easy for me to find a little bit of hope? When the shock finally passed, Shi Wuchen's first instinct was to burrow out. First, he wanted to come out and settle the score. Second, he knew very well that all sects had to set up a mountain guarding formation at the beginning of their establishment. If he waited for the other party to finish setting up the mountain guarding formation and activate the corresponding formation to strengthen the mountain, then, not only would it be hopeless for him to seek revenge, he might not even be able to get out. He would be directly sealed underground. Therefore, he burrowed out with all his might and returned to the surface at the delicate moment when Yin Yang was about to start setting up the formation. Yin Yang watched as a person emerged from the originally flat ground with a loud bang. He could not help but be shocked. Who are you? Why are you trespassing on my spiritual realm? Shi Wuchen cursed. King dare to ask me who I am? I should be the one asking you who you are. You bastard, what crime do you deserve for disturbing my cultivation? Disturbing your cultivation? Where did this come from? Yin Yang felt that although this fellow in front of him was so dirty that he could not see his face clearly, he did not seem to be very old. It was just that it was inexplicable for him to be so angry at him. What did I do to you? After a round of bickering, both of them finally understood each other's position and the cause of the current situation. They could not help but feel dizzy. How could there be such a coincidence in this world? Even novels would not make up stories like this, would they? He had chosen this place to build a sect, and this fellow had almost been tortured to death? If you want to build a sect, then so be it. This has nothing to do with me. Why did you choose this place? Although he had understood the cause and effect, Shi Wuchen's anger had not dissipated. Who doesn't build a sect in a place with good transportation and a good location? At the very least, you should have chosen the periphery of the city. You chose to live in such a dangerous forest. Do you think you're some kind of hidden aristocrat? Yin Yang coughed and said, This. Brother Shi, I would like to express my regret and apologies for what happened to you. However, ignorance is not a crime. What I did before was unintentional and definitely not intentional. Please forgive me. As for me establishing a sect here, I naturally have my own considerations. I don't need to report this to you. Shi Wuchen unsheathed his sword with a clang and said loudly, according to the rules of the martial world, the stronger one is the king, and the bigger the fist, the bigger the reason. If you win, then I'm in the wrong, and I'll turn around and leave. But if you lose, hurry up and compensate for the loss of my earth vein. I don't want your life. Hurry up and scram. Find another place to establish your sect. Yin Yang stared at the fellow before him with interest. This guy was a character with some principles, and he was quite straightforward. He was not overbearing and gave people leeway, which was rare and commendable. Yin Yang asked, What is your cultivation base? Shi Wuchen said angrily, If I had recovered my original cultivation base, do you think you'd still have the right to talk to me? But even if my meridians are damaged and sealed, my injuries have yet to recover, and my combat power is less than 10%, I still have the strength to fight. Young fellow, you've really picked up a big bargain this time. Yin Yang nodded and said, you're very frank with your words. I'm very pleased. Instead of a simple battle, why don't we have a big bet and determine the winner and loser? Shi Wuchen asked, what kind of bet? What kind of bet? Yin Yang smiled and said, since we're talking about a big bet, of course, we have to bet on each other's future and fate. If you lose, you have to join my sect immediately, never leaving, never forsaking, and never changing your mind. If I lose, I'll give you a piece of ethereal amethyst in addition to repairing the earth vein and handing over this place to you. What do you think? As he said this, Yin Yang looked into Shi Wuchen's eyes with an indifferent expression. Lord Supreme Cloud was all alone now and could not wait to recruit. Now that this fellow had come knocking on his door, it was only natural that he would try to recruit him. Ethereal amethyst? Shi Wuchen's eyes lit up at once, and he could not help licking his lips. If he had the ethereal amethyst, why would he still need the earth vein? As he thought about it, the greed in his heart surged, and he could no longer suppress it. He then asked with uncertainty, you have the ethereal amethyst? Are you really betting on this? Yin Yang said faintly, if I don't, how is the bet going to work? Shi Wuchen pondered for a moment and said, if that's the case, we don't have to fight anymore. As long as you give me a piece of ethereal amethyst, I'll never bother you again. This matter will end here and be written off. What do you think? Yin Yang said, nothing much. This is all my effort, and there's no justice to speak of. Compared to your suggestion, I prefer a big bet. Are you afraid of losing? Shi Wuchen smiled conceitedly and said, although I'm injured and my combat strength is lacking, I still have my foresight and experience. Your cultivation base is far from mine, so how can a battle like this be fair? If I really hurt you and take your ethereal amethyst, not only will I look unkind, I won't be able to bear it. Why don't you give me a piece of ethereal amethyst and we can be friends? There's no need to fight anymore. How about I promise you something else? If you need anything in the future, you can ask for my help, and I'll do it within my capabilities. What do you think? Yin Yang narrowed his eyes and said, nothing much. The battle hasn't started yet, and there's no winning or losing. How can it be said that you've won and I've lost? If you really hurt me then, it'll mean that I've lost the bet. You'll have vented your anger, and you'll be able to get your hands on the earth vein and the ethereal amethyst. Why not? If I insist, I'll have no regrets even if I lose. Shi Wuchen said angrily, why are you so stubborn? You've disturbed my healing, so it's reasonable for me to be angry. However, I understand that you don't know that I'm down there, so even if I'm angry, I have no intention of taking it out on you. Although asking for a piece of ethereal amethyst as compensation is a little too much, I'm still a saint-level cultivator after all. Plus, I'm not taking advantage of you too much by giving you a favor. Do you really want me to beat you up? I, Shi Wuchen, am not an unreasonable person, so I won't do something like this. Yin Yang nodded. I see. You're a righteous man indeed. Yin Yang's evaluation of this person rose a notch. He had tossed out the matter of the ethereal amethyst to test this person's character. Yin Yang was not someone who would accept just anyone. If this person harbored evil thoughts, Yin Yang would not allow him to join the residence of 9 Supremes no matter how high his cultivation base was, even if he begged on his knees. However, this person was able to restrain himself despite his greed. His bottom line was unusually clear, and he did not cross the line. Yin Yang agreed with this in his heart. Chapter 900. But you haven't fought me yet. How am I supposed to believe that you're stronger than me? Yin Yang said, what if you're just bluffing? Do you think my ethereal amethysts are easy to come by? You want to take them away with just a few words? What a great deal of sincerity. Shi Wuchen was enraged. I, Shi Wuchen, am a hot-blooded man. Why would I lie to you? Go ask around and find out what kind of person I, the Triautum swordsman, am. When have I ever slapped myself in the face? Yin Yang said nonchalantly, can't a hot-blooded man lie? There were plenty of scammers in this world. Besides, are you famous? Why haven't I heard of Sher Wuchen's name before? Also, are you really Sher Wuchen? Sher Wuchen's hair was standing on end, his eyes wide with anger. Looks like you've made up your mind to fight me? Yin Yang shrugged. You haven't agreed to the bet. Why would I fight you for no reason? I care about the bet, not who you are, your conditions, or anything else about you. He didn't know if he should fight or not, and he felt aggrieved if he left. Moreover, this fellow in front of him could infuriate him to death with his words. Sher Wuchen was on the verge of a mental breakdown. He gritted his teeth and said, tell me, what do you want? As soon as the words left his mouth, Sher Wuchen suddenly felt that the tables had turned. Wasn't he here to question him? Why now, how did it turn out like this? If you lose, you'll be my subordinate. If you win, I'll give you whatever you want. Yin Yang said, it's such a simple bet. Don't you understand it? Sher Wuchen grabbed the sword in his hand again and said angrily, fine. I'll bet. Yin Yang said, wait, do you think I'll bet just because you said so? Where's your stake? I'm here, my sect is here. Even if I run away, my sect will still be here. But what about you? What if you don't want to admit your loss? There was a swordsman called Liao Yuyan who lied to me like this last time. Swordsmen are unreliable. Sher Wuchen took a deep breath. Bets have always been restricted by heavenly rules. Heaven is the witness of victory and defeat. If you're willing to bet, you have to accept your loss. No one dares to go against it. Are you deliberately making a fool out of me by spouting nonsense and pestering me endlessly? Good, good, good. My words are like the wind. It's too late to regret. Yin Yang drew his saber slowly and said, Sher Wuchen, you shall be the first subordinate of the residents of 9 Supremes. Sher Wuchen was so angry that he laughed. I was kind and had no intention of hurting you, but since you've put it that way, I might as well teach you an unforgettable lesson today. There's no such thing as a fluke in the path of cultivation, and it's ridiculous to spout nonsense. At this point, there was no turning back. Both of them held their swords and sabers and stood facing each other from a distance of 50 feet. The battle could break out at any moment. Sher Wuchen circulated the mystical qi in his body, feeling as if his mystical qi was surging like a great river. Although it was not as boundless and endless as when it was at its peak, he was confident that he had the strength to fight. At the very least, his old injuries would not relapse in the battle atmosphere that he had predicted. In this battle, as long as he did not use any power that exceeded that of a 4th-level honor, he would definitely be fine. With this thought in mind, he could not help but feel relieved. With his saint-level deific consciousness, he could quickly determine that Yin Yang's true cultivation base was only 3rd-level honor. Although he was surprised that Yin Yang had such a cultivation base at such a young age, which was very commendable, he would not be able to defeat him in this battle no matter what. In terms of cultivation base, Sher Wuchen's performance was limited, but he was still a 4th-level honor, which was far superior to his opponent. In terms of deific consciousness, he was a saint-level 1, which allowed him to know everything about his opponent. In addition to that, there was also his experience and knowledge. How could his opponent be compared to him at such a young age? No matter how one looked at it, the winner of this battle would definitely be him. Sher Wuchen had even thought about it. After he had defeated and subdued Yin Yang, he would definitely teach this young man a good lesson. The condition that he had promised earlier could still be fulfilled. After all, the other party had given him the ethereal amethyst. It would not be nice for Sher Wuchen to finish him off and then take the treasure. After all, a swordsman had his dignity and integrity. However, Sher Wuchen's body suddenly straightened, and the sword in his hand let out a clear clang. In that instant, he seemed to have grown 2 heads taller, showing off his sharpness and gleaming coldly. 2 sharp rays shot out from his eyes, as if they were tangible. The tip of the sword also spat out a sharp sword ray that was at least 3 feet long. At this moment, his body, his heart, his spirit, and his sword had all merged into one, without any impurities. I am the sword, and the sword is me. In the face of Shi Wuchen's display of power, Yun Yang's heart trembled violently. A vague thought flashed across his mind, as if something important had flashed by. It was clearly within reach, but he had missed it. Yun Yang wanted to recall it in detail and seize the opportunity of this flash of inspiration, but unfortunately, he did not have the time to consider it further. This was because the other party's sword had already turned into a ray of light that could split the heavens and the earth, charging towards him. However, in a flash, the sword ray had already reached the center of Yun Yang's brows. Shi Wuchen's attack was so fast that it was the fastest person Yun Yang had ever met in his life. Even Ling Xiaozui, whom Yun Yang had met in the Tianxian continent, might not be as fast as this person's sword at its peak. This sword was so fast that Yun Yang did not even have time to evade it. It seemed like the only way out was to be hit by the sword. Just as the sword seemed to have hit Yun Yang, his entire body turned into a cloud of mist with a poof. The lightning-like sword ray shot through the cloud of mist. It looked like it had hit its target, but in reality, it did not find anything. Shi Wuchen's heart was filled with shock. What was going on? What kind of mystical art was this? How could it be so strange? Before Shi Wuchen could recover from his shock, he had already felt a sharp gust of wind from the saber slashing down from behind him with an unstoppable momentum. Facing such a vicious attack, Shi Wuchen's shock was dispelled. However, he did not even turn his head. With a casual sway of his body, 3 afterimages shot out at lightning speed. Following that, 3 rays of sword light shot back in the opposite direction to attack Yun Yang. Yun Yang was shocked when he saw Shi Wuchen's counterattack. The triatom sword was impressive. Not only did he abide by his principles, he even looked like an honest man. However, when it came to actual combat, his reactions were swift. Whether it was his reaction, attack, response, or transformation, they were all at his fingertips, and he could do it with ease. This was clearly a combat instinct, one that had been engraved into his bones. This was the result of his countless battles and experience. Yin Yang spun and turned into a gust of wind. The saber in his hand came down again, mercilessly attacking Shi Wuchen. He did not use saber truth, destiny blade. Shi Wuchen could not help but be shocked when he saw Yun Yang's counterattack, but he did not panic. He turned around and flew away along the ground. Then, with a twist of his body, he returned with his back facing the sky. The sword light formed a curtain of light with a swoosh, raining down like an unbroken waterfall. He now understood that his opponent had cultivated a strange mystical art. A simple slash would not be able to effectively injure his opponent. Therefore, he changed his strategy and switched to a wide area attack to test the limits of Yun Yang's mystical art. Unexpectedly, just as Yun Yang's form took shape, he turned into a cloud once again under his watchful gaze. Ignoring the attack and damage, Yun Yang swung his saber at his own head once more amidst the gathering of the clouds. Shi Wuchen had predicted his opponent's move wrongly and was almost hit. Fortunately, he was unusually experienced in facing enemies. He quickly turned around and retreated. Although he looked disheveled, he was not injured. He then roared, "What a shameless brat! Using such an unorthodox move against your enemy." A wave of indignation washed over him. Was this brat a ghost? Chapter 901. Yin Yang's body morphed from a cloud of mist into a solid form. Amidst the gleam of his saber, he slashed down with great force. Nonsense. You call a mystical art that you don't know a trick? Let me tell you, this is my way of fighting. If I didn't have this skill, how could I have won against a cultivator like you whose cultivation base is far above mine? Do you really think I'm stupid? Shi Wuchen choked when he heard that, but he was too embarrassed to say anything more. After all, his actual cultivation base was far above Yun Yang's. Just his deific consciousness alone was many times stronger than Yin Yang's. The disparity in strength between the two of them was already too great, and it was unreasonable for him to forbid the other from using his own mystical arts. Moreover, Shi Wuchen was still full of confidence in this battle. Although secret techniques were strange and unpredictable, they still had their limits. Furthermore, they also needed to consume a considerable amount of qi or other spiritual energy to activate them. It was impossible to use them again and again endlessly. With his mystical qi cultivation base and battle experience that far surpassed his opponents, the final winner of this battle would still be himself. He could even exhaust his opponent to death. What disappointed Shi Wuchen, however, was that it was all in vain even after he switched to 18 sword styles and 7 to 8 combat styles that specifically targeted mystical arts. Although Yin Yang only had one move, he was still able to defeat it. "I'll ignore you, I'll just keep turning into a cloud of mist. After you've attacked, I'll turn back and rise with the wind to counterattack. Even if you have the power to destroy heaven and earth, can you do any harm to a cloud of mist? The most you can do is scatter it. But I can gather it at any time and raise the storm again." The two of them fought like this for almost 4 hours. Shi Wuchen was getting more and more exhausted. It was as if he was fighting a ghost. Every sword strike, no matter how sharp or powerful it was, would always hit the air. It was so uncomfortable that it felt like dying. His opponent, on the other hand, was as lively as he was at the beginning of the battle. He did not even make a move, just simple slash after slash. In other words, his opponent had not even used his true abilities. The more he fought, the more helpless he felt. Suddenly, he leaped out and said with an unbalanced mind, forget it. I'm not fighting anymore. I admit defeat." The great swordsman Shi was on the verge of a mental breakdown. He was so aggrieved that he was about to explode. After nearly 4 hours of fierce battle, or rather, a battle of grasping shadows, he came to a conclusion that he had no choice but to accept. Not only was his opponent's secret technique extremely strange, it also consumed very little of his energy. Shi Wuchen's eyes brightened, feeling a sense of balance in his heart. He said, "So you can't take it anymore? This mystic art of yours has a limit as well?" Yin Yang nodded. "Of course. Any mystical art has a limit, and I'm not made of steel either. I'll definitely get tired." Shi Wuchen threw his head back and guffawed. "Then I'm relieved. I may not be able to defeat you, but I've still almost exhausted you to death. It's not a huge loss, a complete defeat." Yin Yang was not offended. He said quietly, "So what if it's not a complete defeat? You've finally admitted defeat, haven't you? Hurry up and join my sect, Great Swordsman Shi." Shi Wuchen's smile slowly faded, and he began to think seriously. Shi Wuchen's words are like the wind, and they carry enormous weight. "I won't go back on my word. Your sect is being established today. What's its name? How many people are there now? I need to know these things." Yin Yang coughed. "My sect is called the Residence of 9 Supremes. There are 2 people in total now. I'm the sect leader, and there's a major domo. No, there are 3 of us now. The other one is Shi Wuchen, Great Swordsman Shi, an elder of the sect. I'm quite impressed with you. You become an elder the moment you join the sect. Your luck is really not bad." Shi Wuchen's mouth slowly widened. "Wait, let's make things clear first. There are only 2 people in the Residence of 9 Supremes? A sect leader and a majordomo? There are only 3 of us, including me. With such a small scale, you want to recruit me?" Yin Yang blushed, which was rare for him. He coughed awkwardly. "You said it yourself that our sect is still being established, and it will grow stronger in the future. The future is bright and promising. Becoming an elder of the sect will be the wisest choice in your life." What he said was unreasonably confident, as if it was self-confidence for the sake of self-confidence, a one-sided declaration that it was high-end and classy. It was exactly the same as a certain sale. Shi Wuchen was speechless. He looked up at the sky for a long time, not saying anything for a long time. At this moment, he felt as if he had suffered 10,000 points of damage, and there was not an ounce of falsehood in it. To think that I, Shi Wuchen, am the Triautum swordsman. Although I dare not say that my name is renowned throughout the world and the bound of universe, I'm still a renowned hero. How many sects have invited me with sincerity, but I've turned them down. Who would have thought that a sect with only 2 people would come to recruit me? It's like riding a tiger. Chapter 902. But he still lost the bet. The words were spoken like the wind. Even if he regretted it, it was too late. The other party's invitation could be considered as a form of courtesy, or it could even be considered as a form of urging. But if the other party were to directly ask you to fulfill the terms of the bet, wouldn't it be shameful if you refused? Shi Wuchen looked resigned to his fate. A gentleman keeps his word. Since I've admitted defeat myself, of course, I won't go back on my word. However, Lord Sect Leader, what kind of position will you give me after I join the sect? Isn't the title of Grand Elder too perfunctory? Yin Yang coughed and said, our residence of 9 Supremes isn't just for show. As the name suggests, we need 9 superiors. What do you think of one? Shi Wuchen mumbled, that's more like it. What kind of Supreme are you? Yin Yang replied, my surname is Yun. Naturally, I'm Supreme Cloud. Shi Wuchen said excitedly, great, great, great. Then, from today onwards, I'm Supreme Shi. Shi Zun, Yin Yang spat it out, choking. He coughed repeatedly, his face flushed. Shi Wuchen stared blankly for a moment before realization dawned on him. He grimaced and said, that doesn't sound good. It's very inelegant. It's very easy to misunderstand, isn't it? Cough, cough, cough. Yin Yang coughed hard, thinking to himself, you are not just easily misunderstood, you will definitely misunderstand. *T Supreme. Big brother, are you trying to disgust me? If one of the 9 Supremes is supreme shit, I'd rather you don't join us. Aren't you being too generous? You're a famous swordsman. Let's call you Supreme Sword, Yin Yang suggested hurriedly, ignoring the fact that he might have plagiarized the name of Venerable Lord Sword from the 4 Seasons Tower. Shi Wuchen said hesitantly, but this doesn't sound good either. Supremacy despicable. He's not much stronger than supremacy shitty. Yin Yang was speechless. What do you plan to call yourself then? Your surname is Shi, there's nothing I can do about it. You practice swordsmanship, there's nothing I can do about it. What else can you do? They have to live up to their name and have a purpose, right? Shi Wuchen probed, how about? I'll be ranked 2nd under you. You'll be the lead venerable one, and I'll be the 2nd venerable one? Yin Yang's eyes narrowed at once. Supreme? 2 venerables? Do you really think? 2nd venerable sounds better than venerable sword? Shi Wuchen was at a loss. But, Yin Yang said, why don't you call yourself Supreme Sword? You used to be called swordsman, but now you're called revered scum. People who hear you will only think that you've leveled up. That's enough. If you insist too much, you'll only become more unruly. What else do you want? Shi Wuchen looked helpless. Forget it, Supreme Sword it is then. Suddenly, he sighed deeply and said, this reincarnation is really a technical job. If I had been born into a family with another surname, I wouldn't be in such a dilemma today. Yin Yang snorted. Supreme Sword is still stronger than Supreme Shit, isn't it? However, if you really mind it too much, you can take a knife and cut your own throat. You'll have another chance, and I can keep the position I promised you for another 18 years. Shi Wuchen rolled his eyes. He felt that his new sect master's mouth was really speechless. Shi Wuchen swore to the heavens, pledged his loyalty, and joined the residence of 9 Supremes. The shadow of a white flag circled around his body before returning to Yin Yang. The ceremony was considered complete. It was getting dark. Sect Master, where shall we rest tonight? Over there, there seems to be a cave. Let's rest there for the time being. Yin Yang looked at Shi Wuchen, who had washed his face and returned to his clean and tidy appearance, and was once again surprised. So, your appearance is quite passable. Shi Wuchen was speechless. How was it just passable? Shi Wuchen, the great swordsman Shi, was definitely a handsome man. He was about 27 or 28 years old, with a square face, a high nose bridge, thick lips, and single-eyelid eyes, which made his gaze seem even colder and sharper. He was tall and straight, only a little shorter than Yin Yang. He was dressed in a fitted green robe, making him look even more valiant and dignified. In terms of bearing and demeanor alone, he was above Yun Xiaoyao and Bai Shue. His cultivation base was even more so, as he could not compete with the two of them. After all, Shi Wuchen's true cultivation base was enough to make Yin Yang vanquish. In the cave, Shi Wuchen was still sighing and sighing, feeling a little disheartened, as if he had boarded a pirate ship and his future was bleak. However, all the negative emotions vanished instantly when he witnessed Yin Yang setting up the mountain guarding formation with his own eyes. Under his gaze, Yin Yang sprinkled pieces of purple crystals here and there before planting them into the formation flags. 108 formation flags landed on the ground one after another. The last formation flag, together with the last piece of purple crystal, landed on the centermost square. However, the unique purple crystals disappeared without a trace the moment the formation flags were completed. As the foundation of the formation was completed, the entire mountain began to tremble, as if it was shrinking. The power of countless earth veins began to gather beneath his feet from all directions. The sky was filled with sparkling stars, shining brightly at the same time. The sea of stars shone brilliantly. In an instant, the peak where the residence of 9 Supremes was located was engulfed in an atmosphere of rising white fog. One could not even see their fingers in front of them, and their deific senses could not extend far. Following that, spiritual chi from thousands of miles around swarmed over and gathered at the 9 peaks. The gathering of spiritual chi lasted for the entire night. The next morning. All right. Yin Yang heaved a sigh of relief. The foundation of this formation is complete. It's enough for the initial use. Is this the legendary heavenly stellar formation that has been lost for a long time? Shi Wuchen asked with a face full of respect. Venerable sword, you think too highly of me. This formation gathers energy from the starlight of the sky, but it's still far from the real heavenly stellar formation. Yin Yang smiled. I name it the 5-elemental Yin-Yang starlight formation. This formation gathers the power of the 5 elements, transforms Yin and Yang, gathers the power of the stars, gathers the chi of the earth veins from all directions, and guides the spiritual energy from thousands of miles into one place. This formation is the foundation of the residence of 9 Supremes. It must not be destroyed. Yin Yang continued faintly. Complemented by the energy provided by 108 crystals, it forms a self-defense mechanism. Although our residence of 9 Supremes mountain guarding formation is not as indestructible as the heavenly stellar formation, it should be able to withstand a Saint Emperor's attack without suffering any damage. Saint Emperor. Shi Wuchen's eyes widened. What did you use to set up the formation? How could it be so powerful? I need proof. Shi Wuchen had seen his fair share of mountain guarding formations, but this was the first time he had heard of one that worked as Yin Yang had described. It's just some of the rarer energy crystals. I brought them all from the place where I ascended, Yin Yang said lightly. He thought to himself, if I were to tell the truth and say that I had used 180 ethereal amethysts to set up the formation, would this fellow faint? I won't ask if you don't want to go into detail, but the spiritual chi density in this mountain gate, isn't it a little too thick? Shi Wuchen sniffled. Even a sect with a lower-class celestial luck banner might not be able to compare to us. This is just a newly established formation. After the formation runs for a long time, I'm afraid the spiritual energy will increase to another level. This is the effect of the formation I've set up. This is far from the limit, Yin Yang said perfunctorily. I'm just letting you experience it first. I'll stop the spiritual chi gathering function later and wait for Fatty to bring the others back. After all, we still have to build the sect's Grand Hall. When the Grand Hall is completed, we'll set up the formation to seal the mountain gate. Today, the residence of 9 Supremes has finally officially settled down in the bound of universe. Yin Yang was filled with emotions. He would not know how difficult it was to survive in the bound of universe until he arrived. Now, however, he had finally taken the first step. What are we going to do next? Shi Wuchen asked. Rob. Rob? Shi Wuchen's tone changed instantly. You heard me right. Rob, Yin Yang said faintly, in the bound of universe, robbing is a legal occupation. How can we not make use of it? As long as it passes through here, we rob it. If there's a condition, we rob it. If there's no condition here, we'll rob somewhere else. If there's no condition anywhere, we'll create the condition and still rob. Shi Wuchen was speechless. Now, he finally knew for sure that he had really boarded a pirate ship. Robbery, although it was legal, all the consequences had to be borne by the person himself. How many people would he offend in the future once he started robbing? Shi Wuchen's legs trembled at the thought of the overwhelming number of enemies coming to the residence of 9 Supremes. Is it too late for me to back out now? Shi Wuchen asked weakly. What do you think? Yin Yang gave him a sidelong glance. If you're not afraid of heaven's wrath, just back out. You can come and go freely here. Shi Wuchen lowered his head and inhaled deeply with endless remorse. His voice even sounded like he was about to cry. It's a pity that I haven't had my revenge yet. Yin Yang rolled his eyes and left on his own. In the next 3 days, I'll do my best to help you recover from your injuries. After that, we'll begin our operation. You're a saint-level cultivator, the top expert of our sect. Naturally, you'll be the leader of our sect's first operation. This time, Shi Wuchen really wanted to cry but had no tears to shed. I'm actually the first scapegoat. Chapter 903. However, what surprised him the most was Yin Yang's next sentence. You'll help me heal? 3 days? Shi Wuchen's eyes widened. Shi Wuchen was not surprised that Yin Yang had made him the number 1 fighter. His cultivation base was there for all to see. Since he had joined the sect, it was only right for him to contribute. At the same time, he could not be surprised that Yin Yang had offered to help him heal. Only when his injuries were healed would he be able to unleash more of his combat power. This was only natural and reasonable. What really shocked Shi Wuchen was Yin Yang's claim of healing in 3 days. I've only recovered by 30% after 3 years of recuperation with the help of the Earth's energy. Do you think I'll believe you if you say I'll recover in 3 days? I'll be damned if I believe you. However, as a stream of life essence entered his body, Shi Wuchen shut his mouth obediently, his face filled with excitement. The truth was right before his eyes. No matter how bizarre it was, he had to believe it. His actual cultivation base had long reached the level of a saint. Naturally, he knew what was good and what was bad. He asked subconsciously, is this innate chi of essence? With this extremely pure life force, it was enough to suppress all the adverse reactions caused by the pain. He no longer had to worry about anything. All he needed to do was focus on cultivating and healing his wounds. Recovering 70% of his strength in a day was expected. In that case, not only was there no problem in saying that he would fully recover the day after tomorrow, it was even a very conservative way of putting it. If he could keep some of this mystical chi of essence for himself so that he could use this life force to strengthen his cultivation base, perhaps it would be of great help to a breakthrough in his cultivation base in the future. This was clearly a fortuitous opportunity bestowed by the heavens, a super wonderful thing like a meat pie falling from the sky. Shi Wuchen suddenly felt that joining the residence of 9 Supremes did not seem to be a bad thing. Instead, it was an opportunity for his future cultivation path. In fact, he had long thought of joining a sect. Even if he was not recruited by Yun Yang today and was recruited by someone else, as long as the other party was passable, he would most likely go with the flow. Over the years, he had experienced the annihilation of his family and had been wandering around the world. After all, it was inevitable to make enemies if one wanted to survive in Jianghu. The numerous enemies had forced him to the point where he had nowhere to go. Without any help, he had long felt alone and powerless. Yin Yang's invitation was exactly what he wanted. Otherwise, even if it was difficult to break Yun Yang's cloud manifestation, as long as he spared no expense and aggravated his injuries to cast the heaven-earth cage forcefully, Yun Yang might not necessarily perish here, judging by the difference in their abilities. As long as he could obtain the ethereal amethyst, with Shi Wuchen's cultivation base, he would be able to suppress his injuries and heal himself. Therefore, rather than saying that he was completely at Yun Yang's mercy, Shi Wuchen was also willing to cooperate. It was like Shiman Qing seducing Pan Jinlian. The latter was actually willing to go along with it despite her reluctance. Of course, in the end, the two of them were lovey-dovey and hooked up to each other. It was just that Shi Wuchen's thought during the battle between him and Yun Yang when he compromised and admitted defeat was that he was now a member of an organization. Although this organization might not be reliable, if someone were to pick a fight with him at any time, he would do his best to handle it if he could. However, if he really could not handle it, he would not sacrifice his life for nothing. His own life was his number one priority, and he would act according to the circumstances without putting up a strong front. Supreme Cloud was not a simple fellow. His strange ability of not dying no matter how hard he tried was enough to prove that he had some skill. Then, after watching Yun Yang set up the formation, Shi Wuchen had a new understanding in his heart. Not only was this fellow's cultivation method unique, but he was also well-versed in formations. He was truly a rare talent. If he followed such a person, he might be able to make a name for himself. When Yin Yang healed the injuries that he had not recovered from for 3 years in 3 days, Shi Wuchen let out a long, heartfelt sigh of relief. They had not even done anything, and he had already received such a huge benefit. It would not be right for him to hold back any longer. In that case, he would stay here wholeheartedly. If he were to encounter any danger, he would just risk his life. With such sincerity, if he still harbored the thought of leaving at any time, at least in his heart, he would not be able to hold back. The moment this thought appeared in his mind, he suddenly felt his thoughts become clear, as if his entire body had relaxed. Only then did Shi Wuchen feel his thoughts clear and his body and mind refreshed. At the same time, he felt that the spiritual qi around him had increased again. He calmed his mind and examined it carefully. He realized that the originally dense spiritual qi seemed to have increased tremendously. He could not help but ask, "Boss, what exactly did you use to enhance the formation base? How did it become so effective?" Shi Wuchen did not believe Yun Yang's words about rare energy crystals at all. "It's something that seems ordinary to me, and I have a lot of it in my hands." Yin Yang still did not tell the truth. "I'll tell you when I have the time and see its effects. It's not that I don't want to tell you, it's actually very ordinary. I have a lot of it." Although this was not a lie or a boast to Yun Yang, the truth was extremely ridiculous. King said that the ethereal amethyst is ordinary and that you have a lot of it in your hands. Even if it's true, you wouldn't dare to say that. Aren't you afraid of being ganged up on and beaten to death? Shi Wuchen nodded as expected. "Since it's an ordinary item, I won't probe further." He was an understanding man, and a transparent person. They had just met for the first time, and it was indeed a taboo to talk too much. There was still plenty of time in the future, so there was no need to be calculative. At this moment, little fatty Qian Duo was in the persona of a wealthy young master, participating in the bidding in the auction house. His legs were crossed, and he had the demeanor of a young master. His aura was extraordinary. "If it weren't for the fact that my family's business has declined, why would I bring out such a priceless treasure?" Little fatty lamented. "My eldest uncle, second uncle, and the rest of them indulge in debauchery, whoring, and gambling. Sigh, they've even gotten themselves sexually transmitted, Now, the livelihood of the entire family rests on my head alone. Life is tough. A family like ours with 5,000 years of history is slowly declining. It's really shameful to talk about it. However, no matter how difficult it is, we'll never sell this ancestral treasure at such a cheap price. If the price you offer isn't suitable, we won't make a move no matter what. No matter how down and out we are, our family with 5,000 years of history can still withstand some hardships. The people from the auction house, on the other hand, look speechless, helpless, and indifferent. If it's auctioned off, how about we sell it at the auction price? That's not impossible. However, with such a good item being auctioned off, other than the shocking price it'll fetch, there'll also be room for you to raise your reputation. In that case, won't you benefit even more? The commission, however, can't be calculated according to the norm. Normally, an auction house takes 10% of the commission. Apart from waiving the commission, you'll have to pay me an additional 100 pieces of superior-grade spiritual jade. I won't insist on anything else. We have to lower our heads when we're under someone else's roof. To think that we, a 5,000-year hidden family, have seen all kinds of trials and tribulations, have to sell off our ancestral treasure to maintain our livelihood just because our descendants are unfilial. The people from the auction house almost frowned in unison. What the F***CK? Not only are we working for free, but we're also making a loss to earn money? And you're making it look like you're making a loss while we're taking advantage of you? Chapter 904. No, that's impossible. The manager's head was like a rattle drum. Rich young master, your suggestion is too harsh. We have a big family to feed as well. If what you've said is true, not only will we not get any scraps, we'll have to pay for firewood as well. How can there be such a logic in this world? Then what do you say? The ethereal amethysts you've offered are indeed exceptional items, but we'll make an exception and take 5% is already our limit. As for the additional compensation of 100 upper-tier spiritual jade pieces, hee. The manager was implying something between the lines. No. I'll be losing too much if we make a deal like that. This is the ethereal amethysts we're talking about. A dream item that's rarely seen in this world. How many years has it been since it's appeared in our area? Don't you know how big of a commotion it'll cause once this thing appears? The ethereal amethysts that idiot took out a few days ago caused the loss of countless lives. Our piece, on the other hand, has no karmic ties and no repercussions at all. You really don't understand the pros and cons of this. Rich young master, you said yourself that you're a 5,000-year-old aristocratic family. How can you lose the bearing of an aristocratic family? Shouldn't you at least leave us some leeway? The saying that an auction house is asking for money instead of earning is unheard of in history. This is against the rules. Forget it. Who asked me to be born in a 5,000-year-old aristocratic family? I'll take a step back. As for the specifics, you guys can discuss it among yourselves. I've already taken a step back, and I can't afford to lose out again. All right. We'll settle on one point. This is really the limit we can accept. If it's any lower, I'll have to ask you to look elsewhere, young master. 1 point it is. Wouldn't it have been over if you'd said that earlier? Deal. 1 point. That was 10% of 10%. 1%. This could be said to be extremely meager. The auctioneer immediately realized that he had been tricked. This fellow had put on an attitude that said he would not budge no matter what. He was basically lying in wait to scam him. However, a word was spoken, especially when he was the one who set the price first. There was no way to retract it. May I ask how many ethereal amethysts you have, young master? Give me an actual number so that I can decide accordingly. The manager of the auction house was growing more and more indignant. If the other party only had one piece of ethereal amethyst after paying such a hefty price, then it would be a huge loss. The ethereal amethyst is a divine item. How would I dare to bring more of it with me? I only have 3 pieces with me now. Duo sighed. Of course it's not just 3. There are more at home, but it's not convenient to take them out now. Oh, immediately, the few of them began to rack their brains. Even if there were only 3 pieces, it was still quite a lot. Moreover, it wasn't just 3. There were even more at home. What kind of great family would have such a heritage? To what extent had it declined? Was he forced to trade the ethereal amethysts for survival resources? However, no matter how one put it, a family that possessed more than 1 piece of ethereal amethyst, no matter how much they had declined, was still not something that ordinary people could touch. There was no doubt about that. Moreover, from the information that had been revealed so far, it was true that this family had squandered almost all of their wealth, but how many top-notch experts were there in the family? This was not easy to assess. How long do you plan to start the auction? I need an accurate time. Of course, but we're preparing to prepare for the auction, release the news, and then confirm the time. No matter what, this process will take about a month to attract those who are truly capable. A month's preparation is too long. I don't have that much time to linger here, idle. Forget it. Give me 50 million inferior grade spiritual jade pieces first. When the auction is over, just deduct the 50 million spiritual jade pieces. The little fatty spoke in a matter-of-fact tone. What are you looking at? I'm here to trade the ethereal amethysts. Of course I have to bring the money back as soon as possible. Only then will I have a reason to tell the family to bring out a few more pieces for you to auction. Otherwise, it'll take up a lot more time and delay. The people from the auction house initially disagreed, but their eyes lit up when they heard the latter part of the sentence. The market price of 3 pieces of ethereal amethysts would at least exceed 100 million inferior grade spiritual jade pieces. For him to leave with 50 million first, that would make sense. All right. After receiving the money, the little fatty took the contract established by the heavenly axiom and said faintly, "Have you arranged a back door for me to escape? You're not planning to expose the contents of this transaction in advance, are you?" That did seem to be the case. It was such a big deal anyway. Having an extra bodyguard would be an investment for the subsequent transaction. The little fatty left leisurely, not taking a single cloud with him. All he took was a huge amount of inferior grade territory, leaving 3 pieces of ethereal amethysts behind. As the transaction came to an end, the people from the auction house looked at each other. Looking at the 3 pieces of ethereal amethysts on the table, everyone in the meeting felt as if they were in a dream. These were ethereal amethysts that had not appeared in this realm for thousands of years, and now there were 3 of them right in front of them. Send them to the secret chamber at once. Watch them closely. Spread the news immediately. Pay close attention to this rich young master's every move. Don't act rashly, and wait for the follow-up. Spread the news everywhere for 15 days. Then, on the 20th day, we'll begin the first round of the auction with the ethereal amethysts as the finale item. Understood. More than 2 hours later. The person who sent Duo out returned with a face full of fear. "Boss, we didn't follow him." After the kid went out, he went straight into a brothel and found 3 girls to drink with him, and then he started messing around, even more of a popinjay than the most popinjays. We waited outside for something like this. In the end, when the door opened, only 3 girls came out. We tried our best to go in and take a look, but the rich young master was nowhere to be found. This subordinate deserves to die. The stewards of the auction house looked at each other for a long time. After a while, the leader sighed and said, "You can't be blamed for this. How could the descendants of a great clan with thousands of years of inheritance not have the ability to protect themselves? Forget it, forget it. We've already gotten a great deal in this transaction. There's no need to complicate matters further." Understood. Boss, do you think this kid is one of the 2 people that day? You're thinking too much. To us, even if it's those 2, they're still customers. Understood. Now, the ethereal amethysts of those 2, have nothing to do with us, understand? That's what a ruined family should be, understand? Understood. Today is Teacher's Day. Happy Teacher's Day to all the teachers in the world. In the morning, Auntie Fong drove to pay a visit to the teacher's house and delivered a few boxes of mooncakes. The teachers were very excited and gratified. We were happy too, but I was the only one who felt a little gloomy. Especially when a few teachers held my hand and said, "What a surprise. You failed so many subjects back then and were bullied by little girls every day. Who would have thought that you could write a novel today?" I was stunned on the spot. When did I get bullied by little girls? Why don't I remember? The worst thing was that the old homeroom teacher, who was 75 today, patted my head and said, "This kid used to be stupid." Back then, I hit his head with my pointer, and he must have been enlightened since then. "Teacher, you read web novels often, don't you?" According to this, I should be reborn. However, looking at the neatly arranged set of worlds defying 9 heavens in the old man's study, as well as the evil lord and Ling Tian Heavenly Domain's traditional Chinese books, he said to me proudly, "I'll tell whoever comes, this was written by my student." The old man looked proud. Chapter 905. At that moment, little Fatty, who had successfully shaken off his pursuers, had already changed his appearance and arrived at a local gang. Divine Construction. As the name suggested, this gang was simply an organization that built houses. However, this God's Construction gang was an unusual sect that specialized in building houses and cave residences for cultivators. There's a big deal on the mountain outside the city. Is your sect interested? How big is the deal? About 200 million spirit jades. Low rank? What nonsense are you spouting? Don't tell me it's going to be settled with superior grade spirit jades. Be more straightforward. Are you doing it or not? If not, I'll find someone else. F***CK. Then let's be more straightforward. I'll give you 2 million spirit jades as a down payment. As long as you do a good job, when the time comes, there will be no delay or debt, and the money will be cleared. All right. Bring the deed, all the building repairs will be done by you. I'm only responsible for funding and planning. That's great. Let's increase the number of workers first. If it's not enough, we'll talk about it later. So many? Sects. Do you know the sect? Oh, got it. Hurry up and get ready. We'll start work tomorrow morning. We must complete the project in the shortest time possible. We won't be stingy with spiritual jades. Quality and progress are our top priority. All right. It's a deal. On the third day, Shi Wuchen's deep recuperation state came to an end. He calmed himself down to feel his fully recovered body, the long-awaited feeling of being at his peak. He was so excited that he wanted to howl into the sky, but he suddenly saw a cloud of dust in the distance, and a large group of people on horseback was approaching. Shi Wuchen was now fully recovered, and his deific consciousness was much stronger than Yun Yang's. He had long discovered that the newcomers were a construction team. Qian Duoduo's voice rang out. It's here. Wait a moment. Yun Yang had heard the commotion as well and followed the sound. Boss. Did your trip go well? Smooth, exceptionally smooth. That's good. This is the draft of the plan that I've drawn up. Take it and have a look. On the surface, try to follow the layout as much as possible. As for the more specific details, let these people perfect them. You understand? Understood. I will definitely do it well. All right, I'll have to trouble the head chief to supervise this matter. I'll leave everything here to you. What about you? The little fatty was suddenly in a position of power and couldn't help but feel a little dizzy. After a while, he recovered and asked, What about you? I'm going out with Supreme Sword to run some errands. Yin Yang gritted his teeth. Do you want to tag along? Supreme Swordsman? Fatty's eyes widened. In such a short time, you found a sword master? Was it venerable swordsman or venerable cheap? This was the question. It's me, Supreme Sword of the Residence of 9 Supremes. Shi Wuchen walked over slowly. His tall and straight body was like a sharp sword that pierced through the heavens. His gaze shone into the little fatty's eyes, and the little fatty suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of guilt. He almost wanted to break into a run, but he held himself together and said solemnly, "Nice to meet you, nice to meet you. I'm Qian Duo, the chief steward of the Residence of 9 Supremes." Shi Wuchen almost laughed out loud. How could a majordomo feel so good about himself? Still, he nodded. "Nice to meet you, head majordomo." "Hello, hello." The little fatty was still stammering. This was because this person's gaze was too sharp. It seemed to be above many high-level cultivators he had seen before. "I'll leave it to you, head majordomo." Less than 2 days later, Qian Duo finally understood what the phrase, "I'll leave it to you, head majordomo," meant. His boss, Supreme Cloud, and this newly arrived Supreme Sword had disappeared without a trace, as if they had evaporated from the world. He, the majordomo, was the only one left in charge of such a huge mountain. The daily necessities of over 1,000 people, the materials used in the construction site, all the expenses, all the manufacturing plans, checks, audits, and so on, all the trivial matters, big and small, were all placed on his shoulders. The little fatty was so busy that his feet hit the back of his head. He almost did not sleep for 5 consecutive days. If it were not for the little fatty's honor cultivation base, he might not have been able to handle it. He truly realized this. It's not easy being a majordomo, however, he had to do it even if it was not easy. Now was not the time for more specific recruitment matters, he had to establish the foundation first before anything else. The little fatty understood this very well, so he could only grit his teeth and endure it bitterly alone. Looking at the part of the mountain that had been set aside, it was completely cleaned up. He watched as the trenches were dug, watched as countless materials were transported up the mountain, watched as the foundation was slowly built, watched as everything seemed to be born out of nothing, taking shape bit by bit through his own efforts. Other than the tiredness in the little fatty's heart, there was an inexplicable sense of pride that gradually grew. This is all ours. This is our home. The foundation for the future. At this stage, it was no exaggeration to say that no matter who had designs on this foundation, the little fatty would definitely be the first to jump out and fight the other party. A whole month had passed, but Yun Yang and Shi Wuchen had not returned, nor had they sent back even a word or two. In spite of this, the entire Donghuai region was in a state of turbulence, with monstrous waves disrupting the bound of Universe's martial arts world. Many martial artists knew that 2 bandits had appeared in the Donghuai region. The behavior of these 2 bandits was completely different from all the bandits in the past. No matter how lawless the bandits in the past were, they always had some sense of propriety. For example, when they encountered the resources of some relatively large clans or sects, they basically dared not touch them. The targets of their plunder were martial artists who were alone or in groups of 2 or 3 who were relatively weaker in strength. As for the resources of sects with celestial luck banners, they dared not touch them at all. Occasionally, they would even escort and send them out of the country, lest they were caught in their own territory. These 2 new bandits, on the other hand, were bold and unbridled. Their main crime location was roughly at the foot of Swallow's Hill, at the intersection of 3 roads, where they carried out their brazen and unscrupulous robberies. As for those who passed through the area, whether they were from gangs, clans, sects, or even disciples of sects with celestial luck banners, they were not spared. As for those martial artists who passed through the area alone or in groups of 2 or 3, they were all robbed without exception. Other than not robbing civilians, as long as it was a cultivator who passed through, there would be no mistakes, no scruples to speak of. Look at these 2 fellows, looking at their ferocious and frenzied faces, I'm afraid that even if the subordinates of the East Celestial Palace were to pass through here, they would still jump out and rob them. How audacious of them! Isn't that so? I really don't know where these two lunatics came from, to be so resolute and extreme in their actions. Chapter 906. The four surrounding sects have also begun to mobilize. The first batch of manpower has arrived and has been chasing and intercepting Swallows Hill for more than 10 days. It's a pity that they haven't found anything yet. There are also people from the Blackwater sect and the Azure Sun sect on their way. These two are sects with celestial luck banners. Those two scoundrels won't have long to live. That's right. These two fellows will die a horrible death sooner or later. You're right. Too greedy, too extreme, too arrogant. The last time I left, I didn't bring anything but a cart of ice silk. These two scoundrels actually took 90% of it as a toll. How could they be so ruthless? That's still ice silk. I only have 20 pieces of lower-grade spiritual jade in my pocket. When I pass by, I'm still stopped. They keep 2 pieces for me and take the rest as toll. They even snatch 20 pieces of lower-grade spiritual jade. That's not upper-grade or middle-grade spiritual jade. Do they have to be so ruthless? Utterly heartless. They're inhumane. God, open your eyes. Hurry up and take care of them. Sigh, there's no other way. I have to start doing business again in the next few days. If I don't steal some, I won't be able to eat. If I don't have any money on me and quarrel with people in a restaurant, I'll be reduced to ashes with a lightning strike. Me too. Sigh, why don't we think of a way together? When those two scoundrels are caught, I'll definitely go over and spit on their corpses. That's too much. That day won't be too far away. The Jianghu people of Dongye City were almost in an uproar. Almost every day, there would be people going out to the foot of Swallows Hill to look for the two robbers, but every day, there would still be people robbed. Even those who went out to take revenge on the two robbers were still robbed. This fact made the faces of those involved even more gloomy. And the day of successful revenge that everyone had been looking forward to, and the day where they could happily whip their corpses, did not come. Mostly, it was wave after wave of Jianghu experts rushing into Swallows Hill, either to take revenge or to uphold justice on behalf of heaven. In the beginning, there were still some experts who were more reserved and proud of their status. They weren't willing to go out to avoid becoming a laughingstock. Therefore, the people who were sent out at the beginning were all above the Supreme Master level, Venerable level 1 or 2. But this group of people kept being killed and returned. It didn't seem like they were besieging bandits, but more like they were sending gifts. They were all robbed again. If it wasn't to send gifts, what could it be? Some of the unlucky ones even had their space rings taken away by the robbers. They returned in a sorry state, covered in cuts and bruises. Therefore, the venerables of the 3rd and 4th level couldn't sit still anymore. They gathered together and left. However, they were merely giving him another gift. Moreover, this wave of people was even more miserable. Not only were they covered in cuts and bruises, but they also had internal and external injuries. They wouldn't be able to recover without recuperating for a period of time. There were a few people from small clans who were robbed of their wealth and goods, so they decided to take revenge with their entire clan. In the end, they gave away almost all of their clan's wealth. They wanted to cry but had no tears. It wasn't until half a month later when Saint-level experts arrived that the situation improved slightly. However, by the time the Saint-level experts and the experts from the two Celestial Luck Banner sects arrived, hundreds of people had already been robbed. The total number of stolen goods was relatively large, enough to tempt the hearts of many people. Therefore, countless experts snuck into Swallows Hill quietly, even agreeing on a secret code with each other. There hadn't been such rampant bandits in the vicinity of Dongye City for thousands of years. This time, these two fellows must be killed. To uphold justice on behalf of heaven. After upholding justice, wasn't it only natural to collect some labor fees? Everyone shared the same thought, and they shared the same principle. Boss, aren't you going a little overboard? Shi Wuchen was truly shaken and hesitant now. Following Yun Yang all the way here, he truly felt how audacious this new boss of his was. This was absolutely unscrupulous and arrogant. As if his eyes were bloodshot, he snatched all kinds of resources back without a care. In just a short month, the two of them had filled up all the 20 or so spatial rings they had seized. In the end, they had no choice but to rob the spatial rings as well. It was also because of this that they had plundered more than 7 million low-grade spiritual jade pieces, 150,000 mid-grade spiritual jade pieces, and 100 pieces of upper-grade spiritual jade pieces. 3 spatial rings were filled with all kinds of metallic meteorites. Ice silk, sky silk, starry jade, all kinds of medicinal herbs, all kinds of clothes, all kinds of treasures of heaven and earth. They even got a box of crimson jade ginseng. However, the most valuable thing was probably the 10,000-year-old snow ginseng obtained from the Qingyang sect. The harvest of this 10,000-year-old snow ginseng excited the two for a long time. But after that, Shi Wuchen became more and more terrified, because he felt that his new boss was a madman who didn't care about anything at all. He was completely and utterly immersed in the extreme pleasure of plundering like a madman. He did not care about anything else. It's about time. Yin Yang pulled the mask on his face and said, "The experts should be gathering here by now." "Boss, what do you mean?" Shi Wuchen was really afraid that Yun Yang would say, "Rob them all the same." That would really make him cry. In the previous battles, with him, a saint-level cultivator who had recovered to his peak, holding the line, and Yun Yang's cultivation base was strong enough, they had indeed been successful. But now, they would have to face experts of saint level or even higher. It was beyond his ability to handle. "Let's avoid them first." Yin Yang said calmly, "Wuchen, since there's such a thing as robbing, there should be a corresponding place to dispose of stolen goods, right? We should dispose of the goods." Shi Wuchen did not know whether to laugh or cry. Of course there are channels, but we're shipping such a large amount of goods, and the variety is so messy. Not only is it difficult to ensure the safety of the channels, but it's also impossible to ensure that no one knows about it. Yin Yang said in a low voice, "Why don't you tell us where to dispose of the goods first? We'll think about it later." Black market. Black market? What a simple, direct, and violent name. It went straight to the point. Yin Yang frowned. "Actually, we've been robbing so many things recently. I'm afraid we've long been targeted by people with ulterior motives. As long as we sell the goods, we'll definitely be seen through. Whether it's the black market or not is not the main point." Shi Wuchen nodded. "That's true. So what we need to think about now is, what's the fastest way to sell the goods? Of course, the priority is to not be suspected." Shi Wuchen frowned and thought for a long time before saying, "If we don't want to be discovered, we have to sell the goods quickly. It's inevitable that we'll lose sight of the other. Anyway, I can't think of anything." It's fine. I'll think of something." Yin Yang smiled faintly and said nonchalantly, "Let's go to Dongye City's black market tonight and check it out." Shi Wuchen's eyes lit up. Now that all eyes were focused on the 1,000-mile radius of Swallows Hill, it was the best time for the two of them to slip away. Even if the black market was paying attention, it was inevitable that the top forces would remain in Swallows Hill for the time being. Even if there were people guarding the base camp of the black market, they would not be very strong. The two of them returned to their original appearances, put away their masks, and swaggered out. After removing their disguises and bone-shrinking skills, they were no different from two ordinary people of the Jianghu. "Who's there? Stop right there." The two of them had only walked a few feet when they heard a shout coming from the front. Swoosh! Yin Yang unsheathed his sword and hollered, "You two evil robbers, return our goods." His face was filled with grief and indignation. Shi Wuchen was so stunned that he almost believed him. "Boss, what are you trying to do now?" Just then, two people stepped out from the bushes opposite them, looking at Yun Yang and Shi Wuchen suspiciously. "Don't act rashly, both of you. May I ask which family you're from? Please don't misunderstand, we're here to catch the robbers as well." Yin Yang frowned and looked at the two suspiciously. After a while, he asked in a low voice, "Is this true? You're here to catch the robbers as well?" "Of course. How can this be false? We're here to catch the robbers." Yin Yang slowly sheathed his sword, but his vigilance remained. "I see. I wonder if the two of you have found any traces of the two evil robbers? If there are any, please enlighten us." "There aren't any traces or clues," the two men replied. "We haven't found anything at all. It's as if the two evil robbers have vanished into thin air." Yin Yang said hatefully, "You haven't found anything either? Both of us have been wandering around this 300-mile radius for 2 days and we haven't found anything. Could it be that the two evil robbers have left?" The two men laughed. "The two of you have underestimated them. Just today, the two of them committed another heist in the outskirts." "How vicious. Damn it." Yin Yang said angrily, "How dare these two rats be so brazen, so deranged, and so unscrupulous. Don't lose hope, both of you. These two will be caught sooner or later." The two men laughed and said, "With such a grand formation, how could two rascals escape from this heavenly net and uphold justice?" Yin Yang nodded. "Thank you for your encouragement, but we've been searching for 3 days and 3 nights here. We're really tired, so we plan to go back and rest before catching the robbers. We won't let these two evildoers go so easily." "Haha, all right, take care, both of you." Yin Yang and Shi Wuchen brushed past the two men and left without a second thought. The two men only shook their heads and smiled, not minding their departure at all. Instead, they waved goodbye. After a few steps, one of them asked curiously, "Didn't these two say that they've been wandering around here for 2 days? Why did they suddenly change to searching for 3 days and 3 nights after just a few sentences? What's the reason for this?" The other man chuckled in disdain. "These two are talking nonsense. They're just trying to show how hard they've been working. From what I can see, they're just bragging to raise their social status. To think that the black and white twin ghosts are unstoppable for thousands of miles. What's the point of these two people's cultivation base? They actually dared to go in and search shamelessly. I guess they've found a place to hide, hoping to take advantage of the situation. These people who only know how to brag and overestimate themselves. I don't even care about them. Let them go, humph." Yin Yang and Shi Wuchen's journey was smooth and unhindered. They had bumped into 7 to 8 groups of people, but no one suspected that these two were the infamous black and white twin ghosts. No one could have imagined that these two fellows, who had been walking around in front of them and spouting nonsense, were actually the legendary robbers who had committed all sorts of crimes. Furthermore, in these few days, there was no need for the two of them to publicize their names. Their friends in the underworld had automatically given these two crazy fellows a myriad of nicknames. The black and white twin ghosts was the most common one. They were known for their clothes. There was also the 9-feet-high sky. Wherever they went, they would dig 3 feet into the ground and 3 feet into the ground. There was also the swallow plucking feathers. The swallow plucking feathers was already an extreme accusation that the person involved was too extreme and would not let go of even the slightest benefit. As for the swallow plucking feathers, it meant that they would reach out for even the slightest bit of benefit. Come to think of it, even their lower-class spiritual jade was taken away. How could it not be the swallow plucking feathers? However, the most famous and widely known nickname of these two people was the Raiders of All But God. As the name suggested, it meant that other than God and these two people who would not be robbed, everyone else would be robbed. Ant is still in the critical care period, unconscious. I took over cousin brother's shift for a day and a night yesterday, and he came to take over this morning. My cousin-in-law has also applied for leave, and second cousin brother who was out of town has rushed back as well, so I'm considered to be temporarily freed. However, the situation is not optimistic. At the age of 85, surgery is not an option, so conservative treatment is the only option. The overflowing blood clots and hydrocephalus can only wait for the body to absorb them slowly and then recover naturally. The only thing we can do now is to use medicine and fluid transfusion to assist. I only hope that aunt is blessed by the heavens. There are 2 chapters today, so I'll make the best use of my time at home to write to make up for it. Thank you for your understanding. Chapter 907. At this moment, countless divine senses were rippling in the sky above Swallow's Hill for thousands of miles. They were almost connected into one and solidified. Under such circumstances, the 2 fellows who claimed to be the raiders of all but God would have nowhere to hide once they appeared. There were 30 to 40 saint-level experts lying in ambush in all directions. Because now everyone knew one thing: these 2 people were no longer simple robbers. They were gold mines, pure gold mines. As long as they were caught, the massive amount of wealth they had plundered would naturally fall into the hands of that person. However, there was no movement for a few days. It was as if the 2 from the raiders of all but God had disappeared. No one was in a hurry. They were all high-level cultivators, each with their own determination. This was especially so since everyone knew that the 2 from the raiders of all but God would eventually sell off so many resources. As long as they made a move, they would be able to find out who the culprit was. They might even be able to find out more by following the clues. The entire black market is already under our control. Let's see where you can go. Even the martial world's black market nearby was no exception. It was all under our control. Although Yun Yang and Shi Wuchen did not know the arrangements of these people, they had a rough idea. Now, the 2 of them were walking openly in the black market's territory. Shi Wuchen still did not know what Yun Yang was planning, and could only follow him in confusion. He was still racking his brains. With so many goods, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens to sell even a portion of them under such strict surveillance, let alone all of them. That's impossible, all right? Supreme Cloud, your strength seems to have improved tremendously during this period of time. Shi Wuchen suddenly thought of this problem and reminded him, however, the path of cultivation still needs to be steady and steady. Only by consolidating the foundation can you go further. Although he had only spent a limited amount of time with Yun Yang, how could he not see that Yun Yang's combat experience was growing by leaps and bounds, based on his experience, as well as their cooperation in actual combat. Lord Supreme Cloud was now able to handle cultivators of different cultivation bases and abilities in the bound of universe with ease. What was more frightening was that as the battle continued to escalate, Yun Yang's cultivation base was also growing at a visible rate. This was both within reason and not within reason at the same time. Why would there be such a contradictory understanding? In fact, the reason was very simple. Actual combat was the only way for cultivators to advance in their cultivation. Whether it was used to consolidate the current cultivation realm, refine the purity of one's qi, sharpen one's state of mind, or even use battle to stimulate one's own recovery and growth, all of these could yield twice the result with half the effort. Therefore, it was reasonable for Yun Yang's cultivation base to improve after going through a series of actual battles. On the other hand, Yun Yang seemed to have improved too much. His improvement was too great, and the extent of his improvement was so high that Shi Wuchen found it hard to believe. It was just like how a cultivator had improved. It was already difficult for an ordinary person to improve a little after going through many actual battles, while a talented person could improve a lot, but advancing a small realm was almost their limit. At most, they would have accumulated enough to break through the bottleneck and climb to the peak of a new realm, but it would be extremely difficult for them to break through multiple stages in a row. However, Yun Yang had broken this established understanding and really broke through multiple stages in a row. Of course, it was illogical and baffling. From Shi Wuchen's point of view, although Yun Yang was extremely talented, he should not have been able to improve so much. He suspected that Yun Yang might have cultivated some kind of method that only focused on improving his cultivation base while neglecting his own foundation. That would be neglecting the essentials and focusing on trifles, and it would be foolish beyond measure. In view of this, Shi Wuchen felt that he was duty-bound. He had to remind him. I understand. I'll take note of this. Yin Yang was well aware of Shi Wuchen's reminder and did not mind it at all. Skyscrapers were built from the ground up. If one did not lay a good foundation and only advanced by leaps and bounds, how could one last long in the path of cultivation? However, the battles during this period had indeed given Yin Yang a special feeling that was different from the past. It was a feeling of fighting and killing under high pressure, where life and death hung by a hair's breadth. To face fresh blood and come into contact with death. This continuous high-pressure atmosphere was enough for any cultivator who could withstand such pressure to increase their cultivation base at an insane rate, as if a floodgate had been opened. Although Yin Yang knew that his situation was different from others, Shi Wuchen did not know that. Moreover, no matter how good his foundation was, he should still pay attention to it. Shi Wuchen understood this feeling very well. Because his cultivation base had already reached the level of saint, he had experienced this more than once. That was why he could guide Yin Yang as someone who had experienced it. Based on Shi Wuchen's self-knowledge alone, even though this kind of advancement was fast, he needed to enter a period of tranquility every once in a while to buffer, pass, and recuperate. Only then would he be able to slowly digest all the battle experience he had accumulated in the past and truly integrate it into his body. If he could not do so, it would instead leave behind regrets, and he would want to rush but not reach his goal. Yin Yang, on the other hand, had been fighting for more than a month before he stopped to rest and recuperate. To Shi Wuchen, this period was too long, and there was a high possibility that there would be hidden dangers. I can see that your saber technique is undergoing a subtle change. Shi Wuchen recalled slowly, trying his best to find every change in Yin Yang. From the moment he joined the sect, he and Yin Yang had already become a community of mutual benefit. The better Yin Yang was, the better he would be. The more perfect Yin Yang was, the stronger he was, and the further he went, the happier Shi Wuchen was. This meant that the two of them could survive longer in this treacherous martial world. To have a companion on the path of cultivation was a rare and wonderful thing. Yes, after the battle with you that day, I suddenly understood this problem. It's a problem that I've never been involved in before I ascended. Yin Yang walked forward briskly and said, the reason you became a swordsman and came to where you are today all by yourself, I think it's because you have nothing else besides your sword, right? Shi Wuchen asked in surprise, you saw it? Yes, it's because of that. I extended it to myself, and associated it with a problem that's closely related to me, the saber. How can I improve my saber technique? Yin Yang said, in the realm I ascended to, my strength was unparalleled in the world, causing me to become complacent. I thought that my saber technique had reached its limit, and there was no room for improvement within a short period of time. After this period of time, I realized that I was but a frog in a well, peering at the sky. After the battle with you, I decided to find a way out. Shi Wuchen said, actually. Chapter 908. All right. Shi Wuchen swallowed the rest of his words as soon as he opened his mouth. The path that one had come to understand and walk on by oneself and the path that one was told and guided by others were two entirely different concepts. As they spoke, they had already entered the busiest street area of the black market. There were many martial artists walking back and forth, and there was an endless stream of people going in and out of each shop. Supreme Cloud, what are you going to do? I think it's better that you reveal your plan to me. First, it will reassure me, and second, it will let me know how to cooperate. Shi Wuchen asked, there are too many people in this realm waiting for us to show up. I dare say that every shop has a spy with the same goal in mind. We've only revealed a small flaw, and it'll be an irreversible disaster. Don't let your guard down just because the main force is there. Shi Wuchen really could not understand how Yin Yang could sell the goods in their hands without batting an eyelid. The value of the goods in their hands was considerable, and the quantity was even more shocking. It was an almost impossible task. Don't worry, I have a plan. You only need to follow along. If I tell you in advance, you'll be in danger. But I already have a plan in mind. Yin Yang's gaze was focused on a shop in front of him. The world's rare treasure. This is the branch of the General Commerce League, the #1 chamber of commerce in the bound of universe. It has a high reputation, but the risk is equally high, Shi Wuchen reminded him. The General Commerce League has many hidden dragons and crouching tigers, with countless experts. It's the possessor of a middle-class celestial luck banner, and it's trying to attain an upper-class celestial luck banner. This force is definitely not to be trifled with. I know. They are the ones I'm looking for. Yin Yang took a step forward and entered the room. Shi Wuchen was startled by what he saw. In his mind, this was the shop that should not be trifled with in the entire black market. It was also the shop with the highest risk of being discovered. That was why he spoke so bluntly just now, because he did not want Yin Yang to sell his goods here. Unexpectedly, Yin Yang had his eyes on this shop. Wasn't this courting death without hesitation? But now that Yin Yang had already gone in, Shi Wuchen could only stomp his feet and sigh as he followed. Forget it, Big Brother will accompany you to death. Sir, please come in. What do you need? Please tell me directly. I can follow the clues and guide you. Is your shopkeeper here? I have a huge deal to discuss with him face to face. Yin Yang's voice was loud enough for many customers in the shop to hear him. As soon as he said that, at least 7 or 8 pairs of eyes looked over. Their gazes were either filled with doubt or scrutiny. Quite a number of people began to connect the dots. Could these two be the legendary All But God? Black and white double ghosts? A swallow plucking its feathers? You're in the General Commerce Alliance's shop, and you're talking about big business? The meaning behind this was no small matter. And it's a super big business? How super? If he didn't have a certain amount of weight, he would probably be embarrassed and unable to step down from the stage. When the waiter heard this, he was stunned for a moment. However, he was extremely well-mannered and did not show any neglect as he respectfully said, "Then please wait for a moment, this lowly one will go in and inform them." Yin Yang nodded and found a chair to sit down on. Looking around, he looked at everyone around him, acting like he was the richest tycoon in the world. This kind of obnoxious and arrogant behavior made all the suspicious people have the same thought, most likely not. The Raiders of All But God duo was unscrupulous in their actions, but they wouldn't do it so blatantly, would they? Did they have a death wish? Not long after, the waiter came down. "Sir, my butler is waiting upstairs. Please follow me." Yin Yang stood up and said, "That's right. There should be a suitable place to discuss a big deal." As he ascended the stairs, Yin Yang could feel 7 to 8 deific senses lingering around him. Each one of them was unusually sharp, as if they wanted to penetrate his entire body and observe his internal organs clearly. No one spoke, but they watched the two of them walk up in silence. They were like a pack of silent wolves, watching coldly as their prey entered their territory, waiting to see what would happen. The shopkeeper of world's rare treasures was an old man with a lean face. His hair was a little white, and beneath his long brows was a pair of deep eyes. He was thin, but not as voluptuous as an ordinary merchant. Watching Yin Yang walk into the room, he stood up with a faint smile. "Honorable guest, I wonder what kind of big deal you'd like to help this humble shop with? I'm Feng Guohai. May I ask for your honorable name?" "I'm Yin Yang." Yin Yang gave his real name openly. "Shopkeeper Feng, it's an honor to meet you." "It's an honor to meet you. Please enlighten me, young Master Yun." Feng Guohai's deep eyes glanced at Yin Yang, but there was no unusual emotion in his gaze. There was no curiosity, no scrutiny, and no suspicion. There was only calmness, indifference like still water. He was indeed a member of the General Commerce League. Just this calm demeanor alone was extraordinary. Yin Yang praised him sincerely in his heart. "To be honest, shopkeeper Feng, I'm here this time because I've unintentionally made a fortune. I'd like to sell it and exchange it for some upper-class spiritual jade pieces. Or perhaps, some upper-class heaven and earth treasure." Yin Yang went straight to the point, getting straight to the point. Oh. May I ask what good stuff it is? This shop doesn't have many common goods that we can't handle. Our reputation is still passable. Feng Guohai's eyebrows twitched, looking rather serious. It's just a few pieces of ethereal amethysts. Yin Yang sighed. To be honest, I'm someone who ascended from the lower realm. Coming to the bound of universe for the first time, I've misjudged the customs and practices of this realm and accidentally exposed myself. Although I can't bear to part with this treasure, I have to. Keeping it with me will only invite trouble. I've embarrassed myself in front of you, shopkeeper Feng. Feng Guohai understood at once and said with a smile, this old man heard that a little fatty took out the ethereal amethysts on the street and was stunned for a moment. So, that's my brother then. Sigh, it's all tearful now. Yin Yang sighed. My initial intention was to give him some resources to cultivate on his own, but he didn't treat it as anything good. He thought that it was an ordinary item from me and actually opened the spatial ring on the street and took it. Yin Yang was speechless, his expression inexplicably conflicted. Feng Guohai laughed and said, I see. I say, there's no story without coincidences in this world. If it weren't for this old man might not have been able to witness young master's trip. Chapter 909. As the General Commerce League's branch manager, Feng Guohai's position was highly respected as well. He was not someone anyone could meet. The reason he had come out so readily this time was because of the so-called Raiders of All But God. He had come out to meet them because he suspected that these two men were the Raiders of All But God. After all, money and silk were tempting. The Raiders of All But God's possessions were all stolen goods. As long as they could be acquired, it would be a considerable profit to the local forces. The General Commerce League's branch manager was no exception. The best part was that they did not have to spend any money to acquire the items from these two men. Although he was sure that they were not, he was not disappointed at all. The ethereal amethyst was much more valuable. The latter would not pale in comparison to the former, it might even surpass it. In terms of pure value, the market price of a piece of ethereal amethyst was 3,000 upper-class spiritual jade pieces, and there was no market for it. It was already a considerable sum, and Yin Yang had even mentioned that he had a few pieces. The total value was bound to be an unusually large sum. Compared to the loot that the Raiders of All But God had plundered, it was hard to tell which was more valuable. After all, the loot that the Raiders of All But God had plundered was massive in quantity and variety, but they were only goods that belonged to people below the level of honor. The overall value was not priceless. Furthermore, compared to the massive amount of stolen goods, Keeper Feng was more concerned about the ethereal amethyst. Even a colossal entity like the General Commerce League did not have many ethereal amethysts that could be circulated. This person's unexpected arrival had almost made up for a shortcoming of the General Commerce League to a certain extent. This kind of treasure, even if it was not sold immediately, simply leaving it in the Merchant Union was already a foundation that could not be ignored. Feng Guohai's attitude took a huge leap without a trace. He spoke amicably, Brother Yun, don't say that I'm a shallow acquaintance. My shop's reputation is one of the best in the martial arts world, if not the best. I'll be frank with you. May I ask how many of these items you have in your hands? I've heard that Brother Ling has brought out quite a lot. Feng Guohai's tone was amiable, but the content was simple and straightforward. He pointed out the crux of the matter, vaguely hinting that both parties were in love with each other. Feng Guohai should get straight to the point. The main point was that the shop wouldn't have any ill intentions just because you were carrying a valuable treasure. Therefore, it would be best for you to state the quantity of the transaction and complete the transaction as soon as possible. Yin Yang chuckled awkwardly. Of course I know about the General Commerce League's reputation. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come here as soon as I arrived at the black market. It's just that, the ethereal amethysts I have are quite a lot. I wonder what price the General Commerce League can offer. Feng Guohai sat up straight when he heard Yun Yang's words. Yin Yang's words contained a lot of information. Did it not mean that Feng Guohai had plenty of good stuff to offer? This sentence was too important. Could it be that the number of ethereal amethysts this kid had on him was unexpectedly high? Can I have a look at the goods first? Feng Guohai requested to see the ethereal amethysts out of the caution of a merchant. As the saying went, seeing was believing. No matter how convincing Yun Yang sounded, as a veteran buyer, he would not reveal his true intentions before he actually saw the item being traded. Of course, of course. Yin Yang flipped his hand and 4 to 5 crystals glowing with purple qi appeared in his palm. The spiritual qi in the room rumbled violently as if a pot was boiling, its density increasing exponentially. Feng Guohai took a deep breath and waved his hand. A wave of invisible mystical qi was released, enveloping the entire room in an instant. Shi Wuchen's heart skipped a beat. Transforming qi into energy. The cage of heaven and earth. This was a skill that could only be performed by a saint-level expert. It was also the biggest difference between cultivators above saint-level and lower-level cultivators. Furthermore, looking at how easily Keeper Feng used it, as if it was not even worth mentioning, one could tell that Feng Guohai was definitely not just a saint-level expert. Yin Yang was moved by the sight as well, feeling inexplicably emotional. Who would have thought that a mere branch manager of the General Commerce Alliance would actually be such a great expert? The General Commerce League was indeed the top merchant league in the world. Feng Guohai, on the other hand, did not think much of it, as if what he had done just now was merely a casual gesture and not worth mentioning. His gaze was already focused on the ethereal amethyst in Yun Yang's hand, unblinking. After a long time, he inhaled deeply and said in a trembling voice, "What a treasure." Then, he lifted his head, his gaze intense. "Is this all you have?" There were a total of 5 pieces in Yun Yang's hand. Yun Yang sighed. For now, only 10 pieces. 10 pieces. This was already an unexpected number, a considerable amount. After all, 1 piece of ethereal amethyst could supply a cultivator with more than 100 years of cultivation. The total value of 10 pieces was almost equivalent to that of an ordinary sect with a black celestial luck banner. However, Feng Guohai's attention was focused on another word, for now. What did it mean by only 10 pieces for now? Could there be more? Only 10 pieces for now. Feng Guohai repeated softly and said, "This old man is a little confused. May I ask what you mean by this, young brother?" "I mean that I have a way to get more ethereal amethysts," Yun Yang said without mincing his words. "You have a way to get more ethereal amethysts." The words carried a lot of weight. Feng Guohai shuddered violently and said, "If you're telling the truth, young brother, please feel free to tell me whatever you need." At the same time, a sharp glint flashed across his eyes, followed by a flash of indignation. The League of Commerce was the League of Commerce. The League was not a bandit. One could not do anything without a bottom line, or else God's wrath would come. Selling one's own treasures and selling stolen goods were 2 completely different concepts. The latter could be used to kill and rob as long as evidence was found, while the former was protected by God's wrath. It was a completely different story. In spite of this, who could not be greedy in the face of such a huge profit? The feeling of forcing himself to suppress all thoughts was an unbearable feeling. Yin Yang hesitated and asked in a low voice, "Great Keeper Feng, have you heard of God's grave?" Feng Guohai suppressed the turmoil in his heart and nodded. Of course this old man knows about it. Could it be, strictly speaking, it's a long story. I've mentioned that I've just ascended to the bound of universe not too long ago, and the ethereal amethysts I have originated from an accident. I was being hunted down and was covered in blood and wounds. When I was on the brink of death, I fell into a bottomless abyss. I thought I was going to die, but somehow, I stopped in midair. Chapter 9-10. There were many such legends in the bound of universe. Feng Guohai himself knew of no less than a dozen of them. Despite his shock, he was not surprised. He even had a subtle feeling that this was how it was, and that it made sense. "It's not the god's grave," said Yun-yang, "it should be the spirit's grave." The spirit's grave. Feng Guohai's jaw dropped, his eyes filled with shock. He had never heard of such a term before. How was he going to explain it? "Actually, I don't know what the spirit's grave means either. I only found these 4 words when I entered, so I'm just repeating them here." Yin-yang sighed softly. "I've only taken a few steps with all my might, but the wounds on my body, both internal and external, have all healed within these few steps. Then, I found countless purple crystals in front of me," said Yun-yang. "Countless purple crystals." Feng Guohai mumbled. Feng Guohai murmured. He felt his breathing quicken, his mouth parched. Countless purple crystals. Looking at the ethereal amethysts in front of him, how could Feng Guohai not know what these so-called purple crystals were? Feng Guohai felt himself trembling. He felt like he could be annihilated by his impulsiveness at any time, so he grabbed the young man before him and interrogated him about the whereabouts of the countless purple crystals. "I went over instinctively, but I realized that I couldn't go over at all. My body was strangely frozen and I couldn't move." A wispy voice came from the thick fog. "I've never been to such a strange place before, but the voice knew my name and knew everything about my life." Yin-yang's face was still filled with lingering fear. Feng Guohai sucked in a deep breath and said, "It said that when one's cultivation base reaches the level of a saint, one can see through a person's past and present life with just a glance. I didn't expect such a person to exist in this world. The voice told me that my physique is unique. It's the ethereal physique that doesn't appear for tens of thousands of years. I'm the only fated person in the spirit's grave. Therefore, he saved my life and used my blood to break the void to open a door to the spirit's grave from the outside. Each time it's opened, it only lasts half an hour. As for me, I can only advance 10 steps in here. If I exceed the time limit, I will be immediately expelled by the space." Feng Guohai nodded slowly, his expression growing more serious. Until now, he did not doubt Yun-yang's words at all. Yun-yang's cultivation base, his age, and the fact that he had ascended from the lower realm, the combination of these 3 factors was enough to prove the truth of his words. Most importantly, there were many such legends in the bound of universe. The lucky ones who entered the graveyard of gods would always encounter all sorts of strange phenomena. Although the known phenomenon was very different from what Yun-yang had described, those who entered were basically unable to move freely. They could only advance a very, very small distance each time. There were even more restrictions than what Yun-yang had encountered. From this point alone, it was similar to what Yun-yang had said, further proving the credibility of his statement. Since then, only I can enter the spirit's grave alone. It can only be opened with my blood essence, and only my physical body can enter. Each time I enter, I can get something in return, such as this ethereal amethyst, said Yun-yang. It's probably the rarer it is, the more precious it is. Before this, I actually didn't know the correct way to use the ethereal amethyst. I only used it to absorb the energy within. Now that I think about it, I've wasted a lot of it. Feng Guohai nodded and shook his head, obviously feeling sorry for Yun-yang's actions. With his sharp eyes, how could he not see that Yun-yang was really only in his early 20s? This could not be faked. If it were not for the assistance of an extraordinary item like the ethereal amethyst and the considerable consumption, how could he have achieved such a state in a realm outside of the bound of universe? Everything made sense now. Yin-yang continued, there's gain and there's loss. I've received a lot of cultivation from the spirit's grave and I need to get something in return. My return is to complete some tasks for the spirit's grave each time I enter. For example, Feng Guohai asked tentatively. Cough. Actually, I'm here to sell the ethereal amethyst this time mainly because of the spirit's grave's mission. 90% of the upper-class spiritual jade pieces I've obtained from the trade have to be returned to the spirit's grave. Only then can I have the chance to retrieve something from the spirit's grave again. Yin-yang sighed. The conditions to open the grave are extremely harsh. My body, blood, and opportunity are indispensable. Once there's a lack of it, the opportunity will never come again. Feng Guohai nodded in agreement. That's for sure. His mind raced rapidly, considering the credibility of Yun Yang's matter and the degree of feasibility of it. After a long while, he finally came to a decision. The credibility of this matter was less than 50% at the moment. If there was a next time, perhaps he could follow Yun Yang to take a look, then this matter would be 100% credible. However, how could he allow others to go to a place like the spirit's grave? Was he going to bet everything on the next trade? Would he not be under someone else's control for a long time? 1,000 thoughts ran through his mind, and for a moment, a look of hesitation appeared on his face. Now that I've ascended to the bound of universe, my horizons are vastly different from the past. The most important purpose of coming out this time is to find a reliable partner. What the spirit's grave needs now is something I can't achieve alone. Instead of watching the opportunity vanish into thin air or perish because I can't complete the mission, it's better to find a partner. It's a win-win situation. Yun Yang sighed. Yun Yang sighed. The so-called peddling of 10 pieces of ethereal amethysts is just a pretense, a prelude. Pretense? Catalyst? Feng Guohai frowned slightly and said, "Young brother, the most important thing in doing business is honesty. If it wasn't so, how would I have come to your shop? How would I have told you the whole story so frankly?" Yin Yang nodded and said honestly, "A promise is a promise. These 10 pieces of ethereal amethyst will be sold in your shop. Then, if it's convenient for you, Keeper Feng, we can look for a secluded spot and observe what the spirit's grave is. Then, we'll talk about the next step of cooperation. Is my sincerity sufficient this way?" Feng Guohai's eyes lit up abruptly. "Young Master Yun, are you serious? How is it not? The spirit's grave is already half dead to me. If the partner isn't harmonious, it'll still be empty." Yin Yang sighed. "I can't help it." Chapter 9:11. Feng Guohai sucked in a deep breath and said decisively, "Since young master is so forthright, this old man shall be forthright as well. I'll take charge of this batch of ethereal amethysts, which are valued at 6,000 upper-class spiritual jade pieces each, and accept all of them. As for future cooperation, I want to take a look at the spirit's grave before making a decision." Yin Yang nodded and said, "All right. Head shopkeeper, please make arrangements." Feng Guohai said, "If that's the case, can I trouble both of you to wait here for 2 days? This old man will report this matter to the higher-ups." Yin Yang sucked in a breath and said, "This is a serious matter. I don't wish for too many people to know about it, nor do I wish for unrelated people to be present. This could easily put one's life at risk." Feng Guohai replied, "How can this old man not know about this? Don't you worry, young brother." He smiled and said, "The General Commerce Alliance will not let go of the huge benefits involved in this." Just like that, the two of them stayed in the General Commerce Alliance's branch. With the 10 pieces of ethereal amethyst sold, Yun Yang now had an additional 60,000 upper-class spiritual jade pieces in his spatial ring. Yun Yang was unperturbed. Shi Wuchen, on the other hand, was about to go crazy. What was going on? What happened to selling the stolen goods? How did it become a legitimate transaction? Moreover, the items that were being traded were actually ethereal amethysts, and not just one, but 10 of them. There were even follow-up transactions, with more ethereal amethysts being sold, and that spirit's grave. However, in the General Commerce League, the confused Shi Wuchen dared not say anything. He could only stare intently at Yun Yang. Shi Wuchen truly felt like he was about to break down. "Big brother, how are you going to clean up after telling such a big lie? How did you conjure up a spirit's graveyard out of thin air, and it can even appear everywhere? You can activate it with your blood essence. If you're that strong, you can just ascend to the heavens. No, wait, if you activate the spirit's graveyard with your blood essence, you'll have already shattered the void. Do you think the General Commerce Alliance is a pushover? If there's even the slightest bit of untruth in the follow-up, it'll be classified as commercial fraud. The General Commerce Alliance will never let us off. At that time, we would be in their base camp, and we wouldn't be able to escape even if we wanted to. This is purely courting death, Big Brother. I thought you were really here to dispose of the stolen goods, but it seems like I was wrong. Your audacity has really reached the level of limitless courting death. I'm in my prime. Sure, Wuchen was on the verge of tears, but he still had to act like Yun Yang. The awkwardness was not something that could be described with words. What made Sure Wuchen feel the most aggrieved and unbearable was the fact that Yun Yang was living in the General Commerce League, eating and drinking as he liked, with a leisurely attitude. It was simply intolerable. Yet, Sure Wuchen's calm demeanor was, in fact, restless. Yin Yang pretended not to know and did not reveal anything at all. There is nothing that cannot be said to others. The main purpose of our visit today is to seek cooperation wholeheartedly. No matter what you have to say, you can say it directly. There is no need to use telepathy. It's better to avoid suspicion. Do you know what sincere cooperation is? This is it. Yin Yang said in a righteous manner. This was also the only hint he had given Sure Wuchen, but he might as well not have given it at all. Sure Wuchen was rendered speechless. You've already placed your neck on the edge of a steel saber, but I'm really impressed that you're still so calm. I'm utterly impressed. Yes, utterly impressed. You told such a big lie and pulled out such bizarre and nonsensical things. I've been with you all the way here. How could I not know your background? When did you go to that spirit's grave? For the past few days, Feng Guohai would come and chat with Yun Yang whenever he was free. As for the others, he did not allow any of them to come, keeping their privacy to the highest level. Even when they were chatting, he would open the heaven and earth cage directly to seal the surrounding space, just to prevent any accidents from happening. In spite of this, Yun Yang and Feng Guohai got along quite well. It was not because of his pride, but mainly because Feng Guohai was a true veteran of the martial world. He was familiar with all sorts of strange happenings in the martial world, and his knowledge was even greater than little fatty Qianduid was. His rich experience in the martial world had even made up for Yun Yang's shortcoming. From the celestial palace to the basilica, to the common folk, he talked about all sorts of rare things, not boring at all. Yun Yang listened to him attentively as well. After a few days of interaction, Feng Guohai gradually understood that Yun Yang was indeed a beginner in the bound of universe. Yun Yang was learning from him, but he still shared his experiences and knowledge without reservation. In a few days, the General Commerce League's headquarters would come, and they would be able to roughly confirm whether Yun Yang's words were true or not, and come up with a follow-up strategy. If it was false, they would kill him with a single slap. It did not matter how much he learned, he deserved to die for his deceit. Heaven's punishment would not target him, and they would not suffer any losses. In fact, there would be 10 ethereal amethysts in their pocket. If it was true, it would be even better. They would reap more benefits, and both parties would become partners in the truest sense of the word. It did not matter how much Yun Yang learned, the more he learned, the better it would be. It would increase his ability to protect himself. After all, Yin Yang was directly related to the survival of the spirit's grave. His life was very valuable. Back then, when our Sacred Heart Palace's Lord Hua fought with the top demon king of the demon race's demon emperor, the Nine Lives Cat, all the mountains and rivers within a 10,000 miles radius, other than a few super sects with celestial luck banners, were scorched. Later on, Lord Hua used the stars as his sword, the sun and moon as his saber, drawing upon the power of the Milky Way and gathering the might of the earth to severely injure the Nine Lives Cat. That's how the Sacred Heart Palace managed to recuperate for 30,000 years. Otherwise, at least 400,000 miles of our territory would have been occupied by the demon race. It was also after that battle that Lord Hua confirmed his pinnacle position, peerless among those below the Saint realm. However, he gained a deeper understanding after that battle and has been in closed-door cultivation for a long time. As for the 9 Lives cat, he became courageous after his humiliation and devoted himself to cultivation. It's said that his cultivation base has improved by leaps and bounds over the years, and he's not much weaker than the Demon Emperor now. He's also restless now. The sudden change in the spiritual chi of heaven and earth is like a signal that the long-awaited war of the century will break out at any moment. Even within the millions of miles of the Sacred Heart Palace, there are traces of the 9 Lives cat's generals and some scattered demon race members. This world may not be peaceful anymore. Feng Guohai sighed, his white brows knitted together in worry. If the demon race invades and restarts the war for seizing heaven, where the Sacred Heart Palace is located will be the demon race's first target. Although humans have allowed all kinds of occupations and encouraged the martial artists to improve by any means necessary, the humans' reproduction rate is still far behind the demon races. Our combined combat power isn't strong enough to fight back. Chapter 9:12. Speaking of the demon race, His Majesty the demonic sovereign has to be mentioned. He's long decreed that as long as a demon couple has more than 20 children, they'll be rewarded handsomely. All the children's upbringing expenses will be borne by the demon race's authority, and even all their cultivation needs will be covered. Once this decree was issued, the demon race's population increased exponentially in a short amount of time, reaching the highest limit in the bound of universe's history and still growing. It's the greatest threat to the human race. Come to think of it, if it wasn't for the demon race's incessant war, which is much more brutal than us humans, perhaps the human race would have fallen long ago, seeing the world in chaos and the demons coming at any moment. Who knows when we'll wake up, the entire city will already be filled with the demon race's soldiers. This isn't a groundless fear, it's a reality. Feng Guohai's white brows twitched. Cultivators of our generation must have a sense of urgency and seize every opportunity to improve their capabilities. When danger comes, other than ensuring our own mobility, we must also have the mentality to fight against the enemy together. Otherwise, we'll be in grave danger. He looked at Yun Yang and said, as for the ethereal amethyst, it's the ultimate war resource that surpasses all other heaven and earth treasures at such a time. Do you understand what this old man is saying? Yin Yang sucked in a light breath and said in a low voice, I understand. I'll try my best to obtain more ethereal amethysts from now on. If necessary, I can donate the crystals that I consume in my cultivation as well. It's not that far yet. Your cultivation base is also of utmost importance. There's no need to be so cautious. You only need to know that this matter is of great importance and shouldn't be taken lightly. Feng Guohai stared at Yun Yang intently. Ethereal amethyst. The spirit's grave. I understand. I really do. Yun Yang said, actually, I was forced to do this. The spiritual chi graveyard is heavily restricted. Other than the difficulty of opening it, there are other taboos. For example, if I can't send in the required resources in time, not only will I lose the qualification to open it forever, but the divine sense left by the graveyard spirit in me will also act up, destroying my soul and soul. In the past, when I was in the lower realms, because of this opportunity, my cultivation speed far exceeded that of my peers, and I was successful in every endeavor. However, the further I went, the more resources I consumed, and it gradually exceeded the scope of my abilities. After I ascended, I was faced with the iron rules of this world. If I didn't deal with things differently, I really wouldn't be able to handle this opportunity. So, I could only use any means necessary to obtain help. Only then would I be able to continue living. Feng Guohai sighed softly. You're honest. I thought that it was rare for your cultivation base to reach the pinnacle of honor at such a young age. However, if you had a large amount of ethereal amethysts as a supplement, your progress would have been too slow. Now, it seems that you've paid a considerable price for this rare opportunity before you ascended. It's actually within reason. Everything in this world has its pros and cons. Such an ancient legacy must come with similar restrictions. Moreover, the spirit's grave that you've come into contact with has an earth-shattering presence inside. His survival is most likely due to your feedback. That's why we're benefiting from each other. He smiled and said, however, no matter how unscrupulous you were, as long as the spirit's grave truly exists, you're a meritorious subject. Your contribution will be remembered for generations to come, and your merit will be immeasurable. Yin Yang understood and replied, I understand. However, Elder Feng, my original intention is still to remain in the dark. Feng Guohai guffawed. As long as the news is true, this old man promises that you'll be the Sacred Heart Palace's top secret from now on. We'll never allow such a secret to be known by others, be it the demon race or other forces of the human race. Yin Yang smiled. Thank you, Elder Feng. It's worth it. Feng Guohai smiled back. His smile was especially meaningful at this moment. From the beginning to the end, Feng Guohai's words and expression did not reveal the slightest hint of suspicion or sharpness in his deific consciousness. Everything about him was like an amiable old man chatting with his juniors. There was not the slightest hint of anger in his demeanor. In spite of this, Yin Yang and Shi Wuchen knew it very well. How could Feng Guohai not have the slightest suspicion? How could an experienced martial artist like him believe a few words from someone else so easily? The more he kept his composure, the more likely an experienced martial artist would react. The reason why he did not even use the most basic detection of his deific consciousness was because he wanted to be careful. If Yin Yang was useful, he would not leave any excuse to prevent Yin Yang from turning against him in the future. On the other hand, if Yin Yang was useless and Feng Guohai turned against him, it would be a matter of life and death. Compared to the ability that this old man had displayed recently, the so-called Supreme Cloud and Supreme Sword were not even on the same level. They could easily be killed without a fluke. This was something that everyone was well aware of and extremely clear about. For whole days passed. On this day, the sky above the General Commerce League's shop of rare treasures of the world appeared abruptly. A massive and inexplicable aura descended from the sky. In an instant, the entire Domya city fell into a deathly silence. Colorful clouds appeared in the sky, thousands of auspicious rays of light. It was a unique phenomenon that occurred when high-level cultivators of Royal Saint and above did not conceal their whereabouts when they traveled. Looking up, Feng Guohai's gaze was suddenly filled with an odd glint as he said, "Someone from the headquarters is here. Judging by the looks of it, it should be a few guardians. The headquarters are taking this transaction very seriously." Yin Yang squinted and said, "I wonder what level the General Commerce League's Guardians cultivation base is. Is it convenient for you to reveal it, Elder Feng?" Feng Guohai chuckled. "This isn't a big secret, but rather than letting this old man reveal it, why don't you witness it with your own eyes? You'll know in no time." Before his words echoed in the air, a golden light flashed in the yard. With a soft swoosh, 3 silhouettes appeared leisurely in front of the door. The moment the trio's faces appeared, Feng Guohai shuddered. Unusually surprised, he hurried out to welcome them. "I didn't expect Vice Chief and the 2 guardians to come personally. Feng Guohai, please forgive me for not going out to meet you." "Forget it." The tall and sturdy Deputy Alliance Master waved his hand and laughed. "If we were to come, you wouldn't be able to welcome us from afar even if you wanted to. What's the point of pretending? Let's get down to business. Is the matter you reported true?" Feng Guohai smiled as well. "Vice Chief, you're as straightforward as usual, but I've confirmed it." "What's the point?" "It needs confirmation from the higher-ups." The 2 protectors were both wearing snow-white robes with 3 golden threads on their sleeves and collars. One of them had snow-white hair and beard, but his face was as smooth and glossy as a baby's. There was a warm smile on his face. Chapter 9:13. Well said. "Is this Brother Yun Yang, Brother Yun?" The Vice Chief laughed and said, "I'm Lang Fan Tian, known in the martial world as the Heaven Flipping Palm." I'm the General Commerce League's Vice Chief. These two are the core guardian elders of the League. This is the immortal Xiao Yushu, and this is the iron-faced judge of life and death, Gu Jiuxiao. Brother Yun, Brother Shi, the three of us greet you. To be able to enjoy the honorable position of the General Commerce League's deputy chief, he was a person of high status and power. Now, facing Yun Yang and Shi Wuchen, two nobodies in the martial world, he did not lose his manners at all. He was magnanimous and magnanimous. At the very least, this was beyond Yun Yang's expectations. Yun Yang thought to himself, indeed, the more authoritative a person is, the more they won't put on airs easily. It's difficult for those who act like they're the best in the world to climb to such a high position. The brainless high-ranking people commonly seen in novels are all made up. They're not even worth mentioning or laughing about. Yin Yang replied hurriedly, "We brothers are honored by your presence, Vice Chief. We feel honored, but at the same time, terrified. We've long heard of Vice Chief and two old seniors. It's our honor to meet you today." Ha ha ha, Lang Fantian laughed boldly and strode forward, saying, "Let's talk in the room. Guahai, follow me." So, it's true. Lang Fantian looked at Feng Guahai in the secret chamber. At least, from this subordinate's point of view, there's a 60 to 70% chance that this is true. Feng Guahai said cautiously, "There aren't many people in this world who dare to joke with us with their lives while staying in the General Commerce League." Lang Fantian nodded slowly. "That's right. If it's fake, I'll lose my life. Besides, the ethereal amethyst isn't fake either. It can be used as proof." He stood up and said, "We'll leave the city tomorrow and find a quiet place to see if the spirit's grave is real or not, to confirm if it's real or not. Yushu, you'll be responsible for probing with your deific consciousness. Jiuxiao, you'll observe with your soul. Just do your best, don't force yourself. If something feels off, prioritize your own safety. Don't act recklessly. If it's true, the person behind the spirit's grave must be extraordinary." "All right, this subordinate understands." Yin Yang was waiting in the living room. With a flash of golden light, Lang Fantian, Xiao Yushu, and Gu Jiuxiao appeared before him. The trio stared at Yun Yang with widened eyes. Yin Yang could only feel three unusually strong forces trapping him. It was as if he could not move an inch. His heart raced, but his expression remained the same. Lang Fantian grabbed Yun Yang's wrist and said with a smile, "Brother Yun, let me take a look at your physique. Don't mind it. This is the first time I'm asking about the ethereal physique. I'm rather excited to see it." Yin Yang laughed and said, "Of course. You don't have to be so polite, Vice Alliance Master." He had bragged about his ethereal body, so it was only natural that others would want to prove it. This was something that could not be denied. In fact, Feng Guahai had been holding it in for a long time, allowing Lang Fantian to verify it personally. Xiao Yushu and Gu Jiuxiao's hands reached out at the same time. 3 gushes of mystical qi flowed around Yun Yang's meridians on their own. When they were halfway there, the trio's expressions changed abruptly. As they looked at each other, they could see the extreme delight in each other's eyes. I'm afraid it's really the ethereal physique. It's so different from an ordinary person's physique." Lang Fantian's expression was filled with an unbearable itch of eagerness as a strange gleam shot out of his eyes. A third-level pinnacle of honor. In terms of cultivation base, it's merely mediocre. Even with his young age, he's only below average among the bound of universe's noble families and sex disciples. However, if he's really just ascended and his cultivation base is cultivated in the lower realm, it's extremely rare. Xiao Yushu nodded and said, "That's right." Although his mystical qi cultivation base is only at 3rd-level honor pinnacle, the width and toughness of his meridians are comparable to 4th-level saint pinnacle. The fullness of his dantian is unprecedented. This is the first of its kind among the bound of universe's cultivators. It's not an exaggeration to list it as an individual. Gu Jiuxiao's expression was cold, but his voice was filled with fervor as he said, "What's more, there's no impurities in this child's body at all. It's all congenital qi. He even has the ability to reject useless and messy spiritual qi. It's distinctly different from the mystical qi that we've channeled into him. It's truly a sight to behold. If this is the ethereal physique, it's true. Lang Fantian thought about it for a moment and said faintly, that's not all. This child once said that his cultivation base mostly came from the ethereal amethyst's assistance. However, any heaven and earth treasure, no matter how divine it is, the user's body will always have a limit. Even a rare treasure like the ethereal amethyst is no exception. However, this child's body, meridians, qi, and blood don't have any hidden problems. This has already proven the uniqueness of his physique. The ethereal physique must be true. The three of them stood up at once, their gazes unprecedentedly fervent. The ethereal physique. There was actually such a thing as the ethereal physique. Even in the bound of universe, such a physique that had yet to be passed down to the legends was an exceptional physique that only appeared once in a million years. It could be said to be a supreme physique among supreme physiques. It was unique and rare. Based on this alone, even if Yun Yang's information about the spirit's grave was false, they could not simply kill him. It was because this child had great potential to be groomed. At this moment, the three of them looked at each other. Their expressions were actually guarded against each other, but they smiled awkwardly in unison. They understood each other's intentions and did not hold any grudges against each other. After all, everyone shared the same thought. Everyone wanted a target that was worth grooming, so there was no need for them to lose their composure over this. Even if this Yun Yang is lying this time, I have to keep him alive and take him in as my disciple. This child is worthy of inheriting my legacy, Lang Fantian thought to himself. No matter what happens after this, I'll take him in as my last disciple. I'll teach him everything I know without holding anything back, Xiao Yushu thought to himself. Gu Jiuxiao frowned and asked abruptly, Yun Yang, are you willing to be my disciple? The other two were only thinking about it but had yet to act on it. Gu Jiuxiao, on the other hand, had asked the question right there and then. It was straightforward. Before Yun Yang could answer, Lang Fantian and Xiao Yushu had already reprimanded him. Gu Jiuxiao, what do you mean? Xiao Yushu's tone was stern, as if he was ready to draw his saber at any time. Gu Jiuxiao. Let's get down to business first. Lang Fantian was obviously using his authority to oppress Gu Jiuxiao. Don't you dare abuse your power for personal gain. You can't distinguish between master and disciple. Gu Jiuxiao rolled his eyes and snorted, saying stiffly, as long as the two of you don't fight with me, let's get down to business first. Lang Fantian scoffed. Can't you see the bigger picture? Can't you understand that let's get down to business first? We'll talk about the rest later. What fight? You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.